Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D in WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the second part of WhatIf Deku was the vigilante green cherub. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Chapter 21, Go Fish. Summary. Izuku settles into the Yamada Aizawa house, and then has an accident. Trigger warning. Flashback. Panic attack. Self-deprecating. Notes. Chapter text. Izuku couldn't find a way out of the house without waking someone up. He had been at the Yamada Aizawa house for 2 nights now. He wasn't able to go on his patrols since they would notice he was gone. He had to leave the house before Thursday so he could do training with Aizawa. When Aizawa was in the bathroom, Izuku had grabbed his patrol knife and Cherub's phone so he could text Aizawa and so he would have a weapon. It felt weird texting Aizawa in the same house. He had made an excuse not to goon patrol for the past 2 nights. Aizawa did leave every night. What surprised him was Hisashi left the house too. He knew he had a job and all, but every time Izuku had been here, Hisashi was home, so for some reason Izuku adopted this idea that he was always home. Izuku felt awkward being there. The family was just so careful with him. He hated it. It was why he didn't want them to know. They saw him as weak and they were treating him as weak. What was weirder was Aizawa and Hisashi both asked if he was willing to see a therapist. By asked, Izuku means they told him he was seeing a therapist, then asked. He was being speed run to one named Hound Dog. He wasn't excited. He was thankfully still allowed to go to work. The only thing keeping him at the house was they wanted to make sure those kids didn't come back. He doubted they were gone. He was currently walking back to the house now from work. He found that he kept looking behind him. He was checking for people who were not there. He was being overly paranoid. He walked faster. A quick glance behind him. He looked into every alley he passed, making sure there was no one following. He was hyperventilating. His blood ran cold. He couldn't stop looking around him. He had to get away. He went into an alley with a fire escape, quickly climbing up it onto the roof. No one could hide from him here. He could see everything. His breathing slowed. He felt safer. Izuku made it back to the house. He tried to hide how out of breath he was from running across the roofs. He hated how paranoid he was. Why couldn't he just get over it? The wounds were healed. He was mostly safe. Why was he still scared? Every now and then he would get a flash of the feeling of the knife or the hands in his hair. He had to cut his hair. He decided, since it was faster 5, Hisashi was home. He walked around but couldn't find him. He knocked on the man's office door. It opened quickly, Hisashi looking slightly alarmed. "Oh hey little listener, what's up?" Hisashi asked with a smile. "Of course kiddo, I can help you if you want. I do Aizawa's and Hitoshi's hair," Hisashi answered. "Okay, well let me get the supplies for you." Hisashi left his office, walking towards the bathroom. He opened the cabinet under the sink, then pulled out a clear box that was full of hair equipment. Izuku had never seen so much hair stuff outside of a store before. Hisashi gave Izuku the supplies, then left the room. Izuku took out scissors. He looked into the mirror. He hated seeing his face, but he would have to see a bit of it to cut his hair. He was just trimming it down a bit. It was currently a fluffy mess. It was pretty grown out. He started cutting it until it was longer on the top than short all around. Almost like a military cut, but if it was grown out more. Maybe 1.5 inches on the top. He started the cleaning up process. He cleaned the scissors, putting them back in the box. He put the box back where it was supposed to go. He cleaned up all the big chunks of hair, throwing them away, then swept. Once all evidence of him cutting his hair was gone, he jumped in the shower so there wasn't any hair clippings on him. He had grabbed clothes and a towel when he grabbed the broom. After his shower, he got dressed, then walked into the main room. Hitoshi was sitting at the kitchen table playing Go Fish with Hisashi. Izuku sat in. "I didn't realize you were going to cut your hair so short," Hisashi said once he looked up from his cards. Izuku shrugged. "Want to play?" Hitoshi asked. Izuku answered. Hisashi and Hitoshi stopped the game, reshuffled, and dealt Izuku in. Izuku didn't really like Go Fish because there wasn't much skill or brain involved, but it passed the time. He looked at the clock. 7:30 p.m. Aizawa would be leaving for patrol soon. Izuku had already texted him through Cherub's phone to tell him he was busy. Tomorrow was Thursday. He didn't think he would be going to UA since the family wasn't showing that he would be allowed home anytime soon. As if on cue, Aizawa came into the room. He wasn't in costume yet. He looked over Hitoshi's shoulder, then over Hisashi's. He made a face at the cards. "Hey Izuku, like the haircut? By the way, your first Hound Dog appointment is on Friday." Aizawa pointed to a card in Hisashi's hand. He then went to the coffee maker and started a pot up. "Hitoshi, do you have a 4 of hearts?" Hisashi asked. "Nope," Hitoshi answered. Aizawa chuckled. "Hey, you tricked me," Hisashi accused as he turned in his chair to glare at Aizawa. Aizawa just laughed. "Why did you listen?" Aizawa asked. "Because I trust you, you traitor," Hisashi defended himself. Hitoshi was laughing at his dad's. Izuku smiled. As Aizawa was putting the coffee in his mug, Izuku realized it was his turn to go. Izuku froze. Aizawa had walked around the table on his way to the living room. On his way there, he ruffled Izuku's hair, hands in his hair. Izuku couldn't move. He was being thrown to the ground. He was being picked up. Hands, hair, pain. He was being punched. No, he was being stabbed. No, not again. Everything. He couldn't breathe. Someone was grabbing his hand. He had to protect himself. He wouldn't be weak this time. He swung out and hit something solid. He did it. His hands were being held down. He was being held so they could beat him up. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't see. He couldn't breathe. Hands, in his hair. He fell to the ground. He curled up trying to protect himself. Pain, so much pain. Everywhere. Something soft rubs against his hand that's covering his head. It's rumbling. What? Not rumbling, purring. He reaches out. He feels the softness of fur. The thing presses into his hand. It licks his fingertip. The thing rubbed against his head. It laid in front of his face. Its fur tickling his cheeks. As it purred, it breathed. Izuku followed its breath. He put his hand on it. He could feel its heartbeat. Slowly the world came back into focus. He was on the ground, curled up. Ramen was lying with her back to his face. He was shaking. He hugged Ramen close. Izuku, can you hear me? A voice he recognized as Hisashi called him. He couldn't move his hands. He would fall back into his hole and disappear if he let go of Ramen. He nodded. Can you sit up? Hisashi asked. He liked Hisashi's voice. It had a nice grit to it while also being a clean tone. He shook his head. Okay, I'm gonna let you stay there. Can I put a weighted blanket on you? It's grounding. Izuku nodded. He honestly didn't know what he was agreeing to, but at this point he didn't care. He heard footsteps, then a blanket that was literally had weight to it was laid over him. He felt safe. He was okay. He had no idea how long he was like that. Ramen kept loudly purring. She moved at one point to face him. She licked his face. He almost laughed. When he felt almost back to normal, he looked up. They were back to playing cards. Aizawa wasn't in sight. Izuku sat up. Ramen meowed. This got everyone's attention. Hey Izuku, Hisashi said in a soft voice. Izuku noticed he had a bruise on his cheek. He had swung when someone touched him. He gasped. He had hit Hisashi. He curled up. Hey little listener, it's okay. I am not hurt. He felt Ramen rub against his side. He couldn't ignore her, but what if Hisashi hit him? He would have to protect himself. Hey Izuku, which cat are you petting right now? Hitoshi asked. Izuku shakily picked up his hands, then sighed. What color is she? Hitoshi asked again. How did he not know? How did she get her name? Your dad found her in a microwavable ramen cup in an ally. That right. You are doing a great job. What's our other cat's name? Why is he called that? Very true. Hisashi joined in. Izuku looked up. Hitoshi was sitting on the floor with him. Izuku was tired. Hitoshi passed him a mug. It had hot cocoa in it. Izuku smiled at it. He took a sip. Izuku signed. It's okay, kiddo, Hisashi said. Izuku sat quietly, one hand petting Ramen, the other holding his mug. Then he put his mug down next to him and stopped petting Ramen to sign. He He went into his office. Izuku realized it was his fault. If he could hold himself together, Aizawa would still be in here. He saw Hisashi's shoulders relax. Had they thought Aizawa was the reason he had a panic attack? He knew it was a panicked attack now. And he knew it was from his head being touched. How does he explain this? Izuku explained. Oh Izuku, we would never grab you in anger or if you were in trouble. That is abuse and it's wrong. Do you have any other triggers? Izuku looked up at Hisashi, who looked worried, but then Hitoshi answered. It's something that causes you to go into a panic attack or have flashbacks. For me, I can't have things on my face because it reminds me of the muzzle. For my pops, it anything covering his mouth or the feeling of stuff crawling on him. My dad's can't have anything tight around his wrist. For you, yours is your hair or head being touched or grabbed. Izuku thought. Was there anything? Izuku said sheepishly. That's completely okay. Do you mind if I explain what happened to Aizawa, then bring him in? Hisashi asked. Izuku nodded. Hisashi liked Izuku's hair. He thought it fitted him, though it was uneven and it was annoying him a bit, but he could get over it. Sho walked out and looked over Hitoshi's shoulder, then walked behind Hisashi. He made a face then while saying, Hey Izuku, like the haircut. By the way, your first hound dog appointment is on Friday. He pointed to a card in Hisashi's hand. 4 of hearts. He then went to the coffee maker and started a pot up. Hisashi decided to take a chance also. Why would Sho lie? Hitoshi, do you have a 4 of hearts? Hisashi asked. Nope. Hitoshi answered. Sho chuckled. He couldn't believe Sho. Actually he could, but still. Hey, you tricked me, Hisashi accused as he turned in his chair to glare at Sho. It was a joking glare. He knew Sho would know it wasn't serious. Sho just laughed. Why did you listen? Sho asked. Because I trust you, you traitor. Hisashi defended himself. Hitoshi was laughing at them. Izuku smiled. As Sho was putting the coffee in his mug, Hisashi turned back to the table to continue the game. Izuku put his hands down to sign. Hasashi was ready. Izuku froze. Sho had walked around the table on his way to the living room. On his way there he ruffled Izuku's hair. The kid seemed to go somewhere. He was quiet, his hands still up. It looked as if someone had paused a movie. A look of fear and pain made its way onto the kid's face. His hands started moving as if to protect himself. His breathing was speeding up. He was going into a panic attack. Hasashi realized. Sho was standing back. He seemed to figure it out a second after him. Hitoshi was still confused. Hasashi moved closer. Izuku, it's me Hasashi. I need you to match my breathing. Can you do that? Izuku didn't react to Hasashi. He couldn't hear him. Then he heard Izuku mumble something. Then it got louder. It became a whisper yell. He would have been happy that Izuku was talking if it wasn't for the fact it was because he probably didn't realize he was doing it. I can't. Breath. No. Aizawa reached over and held the kid's clenched hand. He was trying to tap a breathing technique there and trying to get Izuku to respond. Aizawa ducked suddenly. Hasashi didn't see the fist coming till it was a bit too late. Izuku's fist connected with his jaw. Hitoshi gasped. It was a solid hit. Hasashi had to step back. Sho was restraining Izuku's hands. He was fighting against Sho. Sho let him go. I don't think it's helping. Sho let go. Izuku fell to the ground and curled up in a ball as if protecting himself. No one touched him. They didn't know what to do. This had never happened before. Everyone in the house had panic attacks and everyone knew how to help each other, but right now Izuku was an unknown. All of a sudden Ramen walked up to Izuku. She rubbed her head up against Izuku's hands that were covering his head. She was purring very loudly. Hasashi sees one of Izuku's hand move to feel Ramen. Ramen pushed her head into Hida's hand, then licked his finger. It was honestly adorable. I am not helping the situation. I think he might be scared of me. I am gonna go into my office, Sho said. He left before anyone could say anything. Ramen laid down in front of Izuku's face. Izuku put his hand on her. Hasashi watched as Izuku matched his breathing to hers. Izuku seemed to relax. Izuku, can you hear me? Hasashi said tentatively. Izuku nodded. Can you sit up? Hasashi asked. Izuku shook his head. Okay, I'm gonna let you stay there. Can I put a weighted blanket on you? It's grounding. Hasashi asked about the blanket because from what he was seeing, tactile things calmed Izuku down. Maybe the blanket would work. Izuku seemed to think about it, then nodded. Hasashi put the blanket over the boy. Hasashi turned to Hitoshi, who held up his cards as if to ask if he still wanted to play. Izuku was okay and might get overwhelmed by questions, so they would have to wait. They continued to play Go Fish but talked in sign language to not bother Izuku. They could hear Ramen purring loudly. She had always had a very loud purr. You could hear it almost a whole room over and you could feel it through the floor. She was their little earthquake. He heard her meow. He and Hitoshi looked over to see Izuku was sitting up. He still looked foggy. Hey Izuku, Hasashi said in a soft voice, trying not to upset the kid. Izuku immediately looked at the bruise on his cheek. He had completely forgotten about it. He was used to getting hit from work, so it didn't bother him. Izuku gasped. He started going into a panic attack again. Hey little listener, it's okay. I am not hurt. Hasashi quickly tried to resolve the situation. Izuku curled up in a sitting position as if he was protecting himself. Did he think Hasashi was going to hit him? This made him so sad and took him aback so much he didn't know what to say to stop what was happening. Izuku was still petting Ramen. Hitoshi stepped up. Hey Izuku, which cat are you petting right now? Hitoshi asked. Izuku shakily picked up his hands, then signed. As Izuku was answering, Hitoshi moved to the ground so he was closer. What color is she? Hitoshi asked again. Hitoshi was a genius. He was making Izuku focus on something else. Hasashi felt dumb for not coming up with that. Hasashi felt bad leaving it to his son to help Izuku, but Hitoshi knew Izuku better than any of them. How did she get her name? Hasashi smiled at Hitoshi and the memory of Sho coming home with the little kitten. That right. You are doing a great job. What's our other cat's name? Hasashi made some hot cocoa while they talked and handed it to Hitoshi. Why is he called that? Very true. Hasashi joined in. Izuku looked up. Hitoshi passed Izuku the mug of hot cocoa. Izuku signed. It's okay, kiddo, Hasashi said. Izuku sat quietly, one hand petting Ramen, the other holding his mug. Then he put his mug down next to him and stopped petting Ramen to sign. He went into his office. Hasashi wasn't sure how to answer. He felt bad telling the truth, but what was he supposed to say? Izuku deflated a bit. Hasashi didn't know if he was asking because he was scared of Sho or because he was worried. Why was Izuku scared of Sho? Hasashi couldn't think of any reason. Then Izuku set their worries to rest by signing. He saw Hasashi's shoulders relax. Izuku looked like he was thinking. Izuku explained. Hasashi was pissed that Izuku had to deal with that. Oh Izuku, we would never grab you in anger or if you were in trouble. That is abuse and it's wrong. Do you have any other triggers? Hasashi wanted to avoid another situation like this. Izuku asked. How does the kid not know what a trigger is? The therapy is a better idea than he had realized. He was trying to come up with a way to explain what a trigger was, but then Hitoshi answered, "It's something that causes you to go into a panic attack or have flashbacks. For me, I can't have things on my face because it reminds me of the muzzle. For my pops, it anything covering his mouth or the feeling of stuff crawling on him. My dad's can't have anything tight around his wrist. For you, yours is your hair or head being touched or grabbed." Hisashi couldn't have explained it better. He shivered at the thought of bugs on him. Izuku said sheepishly, "That's completely okay. Do you mind if I explain what happened to Sho then bring him in?" Hisashi asked. Izuku nodded. Hisashi left the room and headed to Sho's office. He knocked then went in. Sho was sitting at his desk with his face in his hands. Hisashi closed the door then walked over. Hisashi gently took Sho's hands from his face. Sho looked tired and stressed. "Is he okay?" Sho asked defeatedly. "He is okay. It wasn't your fault." He explained that when he was in the foster home and during the incident they used his hair to control him. They would pick him up or drag him places. When you ruffled his hair, it sent him back into a flashback. The punch was self-defense against his abusers, not us. Hisashi explained. Aizawa didn't look any less stressed. "So I did cause this, just not in the way I thought." "Sho, it is not your fault or your doing that caused that trigger. You didn't know and he didn't know it was a trigger. You were doing what you always do. It's okay. He is okay. He is out of his panic attack and talking to Hitoshi. I also think that therapy appointment is an amazing idea." The kid didn't even know what a trigger was. Hisashi said all of this. "I came in here to let you know what happened and to let you know it was okay to come out." Hisashi added. Sho got up. They hugged, just holding each other for a bit. When Hitoshi said he got a friend, "I didn't expect this." Sho joked. "Neither did I," Hisashi said back. They walked back out. Hitoshi and Izuku had moved to the living room. Ramen was on Izuku's lap. Hitoshi was setting up a video game. They started playing. Sho and Hisashi sat on the couch watching for a while, but then Sho had to get ready for patrol. Once Sho was gone, they said their good nights then went to bed. Hisashi didn't sleep, he couldn't. He was too worried about Sho. He never slept during Sho's patrols, not since the stabbing. He went to his office and started working. He was going to find those kids that hurt Izuku and put them in jail. First he had to figure out what group home he went to. Chapter 22, not a real chapter. I am not going on hiatus. Chapter text. I am not going on hiatus. My goal is to put a chapter out every day. It's just been getting harder since I am kinda lost, so I am not gonna lie here and I'ma tell the truth. This is my first long fic and I have an overall plot, but I don't know what I am doing otherwise. I don't have like a this happens in this many chapters thing. I am kinda just going with the flow. And I have a few questions that I would really appreciate if you answered. BTW, I am working on the next chapter. It is just taking a second. Also, I am gonna delete this chapter after a bit cause it's not a real chapter. Anyways, on to the question. 1. Do you want me to put more Cherub in the story? I have been kind of focusing on Izuku and neglecting Cherub. 2. Do we want Aizawa to find out Cherub is Izuku? 3. If so, would you rather earlier or later? 4. Are the characters in character or do you feel I have gone off my rocker? 5. Is this realistic? Also, I know someone may mention it, so I wanted to put this out there. I have typed out this whole fic on my iPhone 10 and autocorrects most of what I write or just lets misspelled words be. With my goal, it's hard to read through everything before I start the next chapter. I am also dyslexic, so rereading isn't helpful. Lol. Have a good day. I hope you like the fic. Please respond in comments. I would literally appreciate it so much. Chapter 23, Familiarity. Summary. Aizawa might be catching on to some stuff. Nezu does his job. Izuku is insecure. Notes. Chapter text. Ramen had been attached to Izuku. He found he didn't mind. When he was allowed back to his house, he would miss her. Maybe he could find a way to steal her. His thoughts of how to steal her was interrupted by Aizawa grumpily walking into the living room. Hitoshi from next to him on the couch goes, "What's wrong, Dad? I think I scared Cherub off. He all of a sudden isn't able to come to patrol or training. We were supposed to go to UA today, but now he is saying he can't. And he won't explain why. If he can't go, would you be willing to bring me and Izuku? I love going there. And hey, maybe you can teach me the next part of self-defense," Hitoshi said. Izuku had learned over the few months that he was friends with Hitoshi that he wanted to be an underground hero like his dad. He would be a spotlight hero, but his quirk relied on people not knowing that by answering a question or responding to Hitoshi he could take control of you. Izuku thought Hitoshi's quirk was so cool. Since Hitoshi's parents were both heroes, they had been teaching him how to defend himself. They didn't teach him how to fight outright, but Hitoshi could defend himself. It was also in case he was targeted, he could hopefully keep himself safe. Hitoshi had told Izuku that he wanted to learn more, but his dads either didn't have time or didn't feel it was the right time. Fine, but you need to make sure to not bother other people. The new term is gonna start next week, so the building is going through the last maintenance stuff, Aizawa said. Izuku had not agreed to this. Hitoshi was excited. Hey Dad, maybe you can teach Izuku some self-defense, Hitoshi asked. Aizawa was filling his mug with coffee. Aizawa thought about it, then hummed. Shit. When they got to the giant building, Izuku was amazed at the sheer size of it. Sure, he had seen pictures of it, but he had never seen it up close. He never went this far into the rich area, and when he lived with his mother, there was no reason to be in the area. Hitoshi was excited, but for different reasons. Izuku was actually the opposite of excited. He would have to come up with an excuse, or he would have to pretend not to know anything about self-defense or fighting. Maybe he could pretend he learned some to protect himself a bit. Now he had to keep Cherub and Izuku completely separate. Izuku was shy and weak. Izuku didn't know how to protect himself or fight. He was a coward. While Cherub was ruthless, willing to fight, and wasn't shy. Izuku liked Cherub better, but he couldn't be Cherub all the time. Since Izuku had never been there, Hitoshi gave Izuku a tour while Aizawa went to talk to Nezu. Izuku decided UA was insane after just the first floor. He was in for a treat. If he hadn't dropped out of middle school, he would have applied here. All the life that could have been. He doubted he would have gotten in, but at the time there was hope. Hitoshi, after the tour, brought Izuku to the teacher lounge where they waited for Aizawa to get back. They played games on their phones and talked about heroes. Aizawa entered the lounge. He was looking down at a closed folder, then realized they were there. He put the folder on his desk. We are going to Gym Gamma. They walked out, heading there. Izuku was getting nervous. He couldn't come up with an excuse that wasn't embarrassing for him or painful. He would have to pretend he didn't know anything. He tried to think back to when he was clueless. He honestly didn't know if he changed much from then. They got to the gym. It was gigantic. Izuku couldn't believe it. It was the size of a small airplane hangar. The whole thing had either mirrors or equipment lining the walls. Hitoshi caught his dumbfounded look and laughed. Izuku blushed, trying to get his emotionless mask up, but failed. Okay, well, it's never good to start fighting cold. Obviously, you can't help it sometimes. I want you both to do a lap around the gym. Hitoshi and Izuku started without another word. Izuku had to slow himself down. A kid like Izuku wouldn't be able to run this far at his roof pace. He made himself stay a bit behind Hitoshi since he knew Hitoshi worked out. Hitoshi was really committed to becoming a hero. He knew he wouldn't become one if he wasn't physically fit, since his quirk didn't help him in that sense, so Hitoshi did work out and go on runs, but he didn't do it as much as he probably should. Hitoshi was out of breath when they got back, so Izuku made himself sound out of breath. It wasn't that it wasn't hard, but Izuku did more than this usually, so this wasn't too hard. While they ran, Aizawa had set up some mats and grabbed some gear. Hitoshi, you are up first. I want to go from the basics up so that both Izuku can see them, but also to make sure you remember. Hitoshi nodded, then moved to the mat. Izuku was interested to know how well Hitoshi could defend himself. He watched as Hitoshi and Aizawa worked their way up until they got into the stuff a self-defense class doesn't teach. It's the stuff you don't learn unless you are looking for a fight like heroes. Hitoshi was dang great. He did have small mess-ups, but he still was better off than most. Izuku was so busy analyzing Hitoshi and Aizawa he forgot it was his turn next. Okay, Izuku, it's your turn. Izuku jumped a bit at Aizawa's sudden words. Hitoshi stepped off the mat smiling. He gave a thumbs up to Izuku. Izuku walked forward. Okay, before we do anything, I have a few questions. Have you done any fight or defensive training? I asked because during your panic attack you threw a pretty perfect punch even though you were in a panic attack. That isn't something that just comes naturally, so I assume you have had some training. Aizawa said. Izuku whitened at the mention of him throwing a punch during the panic attack. After a second, Izuku came up with maybe the best lie he had ever come up with. Izuku answered. He was amazed with his own quickness, but this did hurt him a bit on the goal of keeping the two personas apart. That makes sense, Aizawa said. If that's the case, do you mind showing me what you know? Izuku nodded. He decided to show what he learned in the first few videos he saw and brought it down a lot. Aizawa had been training Cherub, so he had become better at fighting, but he had to make sure the skill didn't show. Aizawa raised the hand pad. Izuku struck the pad with his fist with bit of strength. He made sure to have his footing wrong and to raise his elbow too much. Things you would mess up if you learned from YouTube. He even threw his fist wrong so it didn't land correctly. It hurt Cherub's soul to do this, but he had to. That is pretty good. What did you learn off of? Izuku signed. Hitoshi was laughing. Well, for YouTube that was pretty good. Did you learn any self-defense? Aizawa nodded and asked Izuku to show him. Izuku did. After a while, Aizawa told him to take a break. It was Hitoshi's turn to learn. Izuku was feeling a lot less nervous. He watched Hitoshi and Aizawa practice different moves. Izuku wasn't sad he wasn't doing as much as Hitoshi. Izuku didn't want the pressure of hiding from Aizawa. Izuku was overheating in his hoodie. He always wore oversized long-sleeve clothes around the Aizawa Yamada family because he didn't want them to see his muscles or scars. He knew realistically they had seen some of them in the hospital, but he wanted to be safe. He also knew that since he lost so much blood and was kinda sickly, he looked weaker. But now he was buffing up more and more. He was honestly sweating a lot. He could feel the sweat droplets on the back of his neck. He was fighting Aizawa currently while Hitoshi watched. They stopped to reset when Aizawa said, You should take off your sweatshirt. You are obviously overheating. Izuku signed as he got back into position. I can literally see the sweat droplets going down your face right now. The weather is warming up. You are obviously overheating. Aizawa said he didn't sound happy. Izuku didn't like making Aizawa unhappy, so he sighed, then took off the sweater. He was wearing a long-sleeve shirt underneath it. Aizawa scoffed. You're telling me you had a long-sleeve shirt under that? No wonder you were overheating. Aizawa remarked, then got into fighting position. They kept fighting for a while. Hitoshi was analyzing them. You are still sweating bullets. I have an athletic tank top in my bag, grab it and change. You are slowing yourself and making it harder for you to fight, Aizawa said, then had Hitoshi come back onto the mat. Izuku with annoyance walked over to Aizawa's bag, opened it, found the tank top. Izuku had a habit of doing things that he realized later was weird and was probably not normal. He changed his shirt right there. To him, changing around people was normal. When you are homeless, you don't always have the luxury of changing in privacy, so he got used to changing shirts and other non-overly private stuff in an alley where people were walking outside it. He turned around to see Hitoshi looking at him weirdly. Aizawa looked his normal self. Izuku asked. Izuku, you have scars all over your back, Hitoshi said. Izuku looked down sheepishly. His scars are ugly and gross. Hitoshi shouldn't have to see them. His arms were exposed, showing the different scars on them. Aizawa's demeanor changed a bit. Hitoshi, you know better. Some people don't like their scars. Leave Izuku alone, Aizawa said to Hitoshi. He didn't say it in a mean way, more of a reminder. I am sorry, Izuku, Hitoshi said. The matter was over. Izuku wanted to put his hoodie back on. He had texted Nezu to let him know that Green Cherub wasn't able to make it. Nezu wasn't too happy, but Aizawa can't control Cherub. Nezu did say that Aizawa needed to come to his office because they had something important to talk about. So when Hitoshi asked to train, he said yes, since it was an excuse to both train his son and to go talk to Nezu. He also wanted to see how much fighting Izuku knew. The punch he threw during his panic attack wasn't a mistake. It was such muscle memory that even when his mind wasn't making sense, he was able to throw an almost perfect punch. That only comes with a lot of training or just having the motion down. He wouldn't be surprised if Izuku had some training of Anthrax. That would be good because then he could protect himself some. But it did make Aizawa wonder why he didn't fight back during the incident. Aizawa knocked on his principal's office. He heard a cheery come in from the other side. He opened the door. Nezu was sitting behind his desk sipping tea. There was a seat for Aizawa, he said. So I asked you come here because we have a more serious issue to talk about. I did as you asked and looked into Izuku. His old name was Izuku Midoriya. His current name is Izuku Sasaki. I won't tell you more since you can read it in the file. I did have to fill in some and kinda track him down on some parts. I don't believe either your son or you are in danger. Izuku, on the other hand, does have some enemies. Aizawa nodded. We looked down at the folder Nezu had given him. Should he read it as soon as possible? I will read it, will Hizashi, he decided, so they could make the decision of what to do with this information together. The kid has been through a lot. That is almost all. The next order of business is Green Cherub. I have an idea of who it is. I am not sure yet, but I am pretty sure. I will tell you who I think it is when I am sure. Why can't you tell me now? I could help looking into the person. I am nervous that if you looked into the person you would scare them and cause them to run away or do something dumb. Okay, I want to get his kid off the street as soon as possible. It isn't safe for him to be out there. I also want him to be able to apply for UA so he can legally become a hero. All understandable. That's all I needed to talk about. Have a good rest of your break, Nezu said. Aizawa got up holding the folder. The whole way to the teacher's lounge he didn't take his eyes off the folder. From what Nezu said, the only person he had to worry about was Izuku. If Izuku had enemies, that would explain the stabbing. The other problem Aizawa was seeing is that if Izuku had enemies and they saw Hitoshi with him, they might target Hitoshi. How had Izuku made enemies? The kid was skittish. He barely made eye contact. The kid was nothing but overly polite and kind. Unless someone got annoyed with how polite the kid was, then he didn't see how he had enemies willing to stab him. He walked into the teacher lounge, finding Izuku and Hitoshi talking. Aizawa tried to hide his nervousness regarding Izuku. He put the folder down, then showed them to the gym. While he had them run the lap, he grabbed some mats and put them down. He also grabbed some other equipment. He decided he wouldn't treat Izuku any differently until he knew what it said in the folder. When they got back, he had Hitoshi go first to warm practice fighting. He was happy with how much his son had been keeping up with the regiment he had set out. After a while, he decided to give Hitoshi a break and have Izuku fight. He was interposed what Izuku knew. Okay, Izuku, it's your turn. Izuku startled. Hitoshi stepped off the mat smiling. He gave a thumbs up to Izuku. Izuku walked forward. Okay, before we do anything, I have a few questions. Have you done any fight or defensive training? I ask because during your panic attack you threw a pretty perfect punch even though you were in a panic attack. That isn't something that just comes naturally, so I assume you have had some training, Aizawa said. He didn't want to scare the kid, but he wanted to see where Izuku was. Izuku answered. This made sense to Aizawa. He himself had gone through something like that. He wondered if that was on Izuku's record. Before he could ponder too much on that thought, he answered. That makes sense. If that's the case, do you mind showing me what you know? Izuku nodded. Aizawa raised the hand pad. Izuku's hand hit the pad. Aizawa wasn't impressed with the amount of strength. He had seen Izuku's muscles when he was in the hospice, knew the kid wasn't weak. He had seen Izuku bruise Hisashi's face. The only explanations he could come up with was Izuku was either playing down his skills so Aizawa would underestimate him. This would probably be a survival tactic Izuku had learned. The other reason Aizawa could come up with was Izuku was scared to hit Aizawa. He didn't want to scare Izuku, so instead he said, "That is pretty good. What did you learn off of?" Izuku signed. Itoshi was laughing. Well, for YouTube that was pretty good. Did you learn any self-defense? Aizawa nodded and asked Izuku to show him. Aizawa was impressed with the self-defense, but it did bring up the question of why he didn't fight back or protect himself when those people were stabbing him. From what he had seen, Izuku should have been able to help himself a little. There must be more going on. The more Aizawa learned, the more he wanted to read what was in the folder. Aizawa decided to give Izuku a break and go back to Hitoshi. Aizawa was getting frustrated with Izuku, but he was trying to hide it. The more they practiced fighting and self-defense, the more it became apparent that Izuku was holding back. Did Izuku still not trust Aizawa? He understood that this might be how Izuku survived, but it was still frustrating because to Aizawa's knowledge he hadn't done anything to make Izuku think he was going to hurt him. He really wanted to read that folder. What really annoyed Aizawa was the fact Izuku was obviously really hot in his hoodie but refused to take it off. It confused Aizawa why he always wore sweatshirts and baggy clothes. He had seen the kid sweating a lot, but no matter what he never took the extra layers off. Aizawa didn't know why this annoyed him, but it did so. While they were resetting, Aizawa decided to say something. He realized he sounded a little annoyed and frustrated. You should take off your sweatshirt. You are obviously overheating. Izuku signed as he got back into position. I can literally see the sweat droplets going down your face right now. The weather is warming up. You are obviously overheating. Aizawa answered. He was confused. It was a hoodie that was helping him. Izuku took the hoodie off. He was wearing a long-sleeve shirt underneath it. Aizawa scoffed. The kid had been wearing a hoodie on top of a long-sleeve shirt. No, oh dear, he was overheating. You're telling me you had a long-sleeve shirt under that? No wonder you were overheating. Aizawa remarked, then got into fighting position. They kept fighting for a while. Aizawa wasn't happy, but he wasn't going to push it. You are still sweating bullets. I have an athletic tank top in my bag. Grab it and change. You are slowing yourself and making it harder for you to fight, Aizawa said, then had Hitoshi come back onto the mat. Aizawa wanted to make sure Izuku was grabbing the shirt, so he waited a second but was really surprised when Izuku changed shirts right then and there. Izuku's back was to them. The kid had the same number of scars as freckles. A twinge of familiarity hit Aizawa, but he couldn't place it. The kid was covered in freckles. Not only that, but Izuku was covered in muscle. It was pretty lean, but it was obvious the kid worked out regularly and was strong. When he looked to Hitoshi, he also seemed surprised. When Izuku turned around, Aizawa hid his surprise. Hitoshi didn't. Izuku looked at them confused. Izuku asked, Izuku, you have scars all over your back. Hitoshi said. Izuku looked down sheepishly. Aizawa was looking at Izuku differently. Then he saw something familiar. There was a scar across Izuku's bicep. It had signs of stitches. It was in the same place as Cherub's. The scars on Izuku were familiar. Aizawa had to cover his revelation, so he made a point to Hitoshi. Hitoshi, you know better. Some people don't like their scars. Leave Izuku alone, Aizawa said to Hitoshi. He wasn't in any way mad at Hitoshi. He completely understood. But at the same time, he wanted Hitoshi to know most people didn't like their scars. I am sorry, Izuku, Hitoshi said. The matter was over. Izuku stayed sheepish the rest of the time. That night, once Aizawa had returned from patrol, he and Hisashi opened Izuku's folder. He and Hisashi were in their room sitting in their bed. They were both nervous. The first page was Izuku's citizen identification. Name, Izuku Sasaki. Age, 13. Sex, male. Height, 5 feet 3 inches or 160 centimeters. Weight, 123 pounds or 55.7 kilograms. Hair color, green. Eye color, green. Quirk, N.A. This included a picture of Izuku from a few months ago. This paperwork was from when he was emancipated, Hisashi pointed out. They flipped to the next page. This was where Izuku's life story started. PG2. Izuku Midoriya is born. Mother Inko Midoriya. Father Hisashi Midoriya. Healthy baby boy. Joined preschool at 3. Usual doctor appointments and checkups. One emergency hospital visit because Izuku was really sick with the flu. At the age of 5, he is diagnosed as quirkless. That's when things start going bad. PG3. The number of injury-related doctor visits rise, then at the age of 7 they stop. Any medical documents stop. The next medical documentation is when Aizawa and Hisashi took him to the hospital. The six realized that all the scars they had seen on the kid had been taken care of himself. All of the Stitch's scars were his own work. PG-4. This page went back to preschool and went up till 6th grade. His record looked normal. If anything, it was shown Izuku was really smart. He was ahead of his class. Then at the age of 5 his grades dropped and the fighting began. He had a lot of marks on his record saying he started fights and beat up kids. He disrespected teachers. He destroyed school property and was overall a horrible student. Then it was a bunch of absent marks until it said he had dropped out when he was 11. Izuku had lied to them about when he stopped going to school. He had said he stopped going when he was emancipated. Hisashi was angry. It was pretty obvious that the records were fake. Their reasoning was that the Izuku they knew would never do this, but as they read on they started to wonder. PG-5. This page was a personal background from Nezu who explained what was going on. I looked into Izuku's mother and found that around the time Izuku turned 7 she started picking up a lot of extra shifts, even getting another job. She even had a second apartment where she would spend her time. In other words, she stopped caring for her son. She paid the bills on the both apartments, and looking at her expenses she did buy Izuku anything he needed for school and to survive. But she was almost never home. When Izuku turned 10 she stopped paying for the second apartment and the extra stuff. She moved back into her apartment, but at the same time she did that she disowned him and had social services pick Izuku up. Izuku went into a group home. It was in the deeper part of the red light district. PG-6-8 was a copy of the disowning papers, and page 8 was a security picture of kid Izuku standing outside a door with a few boxes lining the hallway. PG-9. His record of his time in the foster system. He had been there for 2.5 months. During that time Izuku was never fostered outside of the group home. His record from the place was pretty similar to his school record. He started fights, was lazy, didn't do chores or homework, missed curfew, was mean to his roommate. This stopped him from being fostered out. This made Aizawa and Hisashi sad, but the next few pages threw them for a complete loop. PG-10-12. These pages were statements from 3 different kids and one of the caretakers. Tatsuki Doi. Me and my friends Deiji Chiba and Haruki Nishida were walking past Izuku's room when he grabbed me and pulled me. I got the room. He started beating me up for no reason. He beat me up till I passed out. When I woke up I was in the hospital. He gave me a concussion and permanent brain damage. Under his statement was his medical file from the fight. The kid had gotten out with a really bad concussion that caused his eyes to go cross-eyes, and for him to have a speech impediment. He also got a broken nose. The kid had some broken bones. He was bruised all over. This included pictures of the kid. His face was swollen with a black eye, crooked nose, head wrap, broken lip, and overall bruising. Aizawa and Hisashi were horrified. How had the sweet kid they had met do this? There had to be more to the story, they decided. They read the next statement. Deiji Chiba. When Izuku grabbed Tatsuki I was frozen. I ran in to protect my friend but couldn't find a way to get Izuku off Tatsuki. Finally I pulled Izuku off Tatsuki, but Tatsuki was passed out. Izuku then turned on me. He started beating me up too. I don't remember much, but after he was done he got up and started packing to leave. I couldn't let him get away, so I grabbed his leg. He then kicked me in the head, making me pass out. I ended up with a concussion like Tatsuki, but not anywhere near as bad as Tatsuki. I was so scared. Izuku was like a rabid animal. This also was partnered with a picture of the kid. He had a bruised face, 2 black eyes, a crooked jaw. Hisashi gasped. They kept reading. Haruki Nishida. I was a coward and watched as both my friends were beat up. It was so scary. When Deiji got dragged into the fight I ran to get a caretaker to stop the fight. I ran as fast as I could. I ended up finding Mr. Ogawa first. We ran back up but were too late. Izuku was running. Mr. Ogawa ran after him while I went to get the nurse and to check on my friends. Their swollen faces are burned into my memory. I don't think I will ever recover. This kid didn't have a photo of him since he was not injured. Aizawa and Hisashi turned to the last statement. They were not excited to read. Mr. Ogawa. Izuku had been a troublemaker since the first day. He skipped his chores and bullied the other kids. We gave him some room since he had just been disowned, but after a while nothing changed. If anyone, he got worse. When Haruki ran up to me to get my help I was not too surprised. I wish I could have done more to protect my kids. When I got up the stairs Izuku was already leaving. I ran after him. I chased him for a while until I caught up to him. It tried to bring him back but he started to attack me. I had to protect myself. The kid ended up running away. That was the last time I saw him. I then went back to the house to find an ambulance there. 2 of my kids were being rushed to the hospital. I reported Izuku missing but decided not to press charges because Izuku was going through a lot. The kids didn't want to press charges either, they just wanted to move on. Aizawa and Hisashi sat in shock. With hesitation they turned the page. PG-13. It was a missing paper for Izuku. No one was put on his case. They literally left him. After a month his case was declared cold. PG-14-15. This was another personal report from Nezu. This page included pictures. Looking into it, I found evidence of Izuku in the red light district. He spent the next few years homeless, until a few months ago when he got emancipated. I found him through street cameras and reports. He is actually wanted for trespassing and theft, but no one knows it's him. He survived through pickpocketing and dumpster diving. From other cameras and just local records, it seems Izuku got into a lot of fights. All seem to be over keeping his alley or his eating places. All of these fights he did not start, they all came after him first. Izuku won every single one of these. Izuku is strong and very smart. He was very smart and resourceful. He sure iced many mugging and murder attempts on him. Then a few months ago he got emancipated. He did this through the same social worker that had put him in the foster home. Below this was security pictures from a span of 2 years of Izuku living in the street. A few of them worried Aizawa and Hisashi. There was one of Izuku taking care of injuries. There were 3 more of Izuku fighting 3 different people. One of them had claws for fingers and had just finished scraping Izuku across the chest. Izuku stood strong and didn't look like he had even flinched. Something else interesting I found is that Aizawa met Izuku before he knew it was Izuku. Aizawa was told to supervise a newer hero who was told to remove a street of homeless people. When Izuku was told to leave, he almost fought the hero Rock Lock. He didn't, but Izuku did overhear Rock Lock call CPS. Izuku made a run for it and Rock Lock chased him. Izuku ended up escaping. He did have to relocate and did almost die. Rock Lock tried looking for Izuku but never found him. That was Izuku, Aizawa said with surprise. Wait, you met Izuku before? Hisashi asked. Yes, like the report says, I was told to supervise Rock Lock tell homeless people to vacate some allies because the people who lived there complain. I was helping a woman pack up when Rock Lock and Izuku ran past me. I thought Rock Lock had it, but he ended up coming back empty-handed. I ended up talking to some of the homeless, and they all said they didn't know Izuku's name, but that he was someone to bother, and the kid didn't talk or bother anyone. Aizawa explained. Hisashi seemed to be in thought. We should finish reading this. Hisashi nodded to Aizawa's statement. They turned the page. PG-16. Nezu had a quick note. I was looking at the kids from Izuku's foster home incident, and I found something very interesting. Deiji Chiba, I would like to right a wrong. The reason I do this is because I was saved a week ago. I recognize the person who saved me. Even though I hurt him, he still saved my life. I can't go on knowing I might have ruined his life. So here is the real story of what happened on June 10th. Tatsuki Doi and Haruki Nishida had decided to break into Izuku Midoriya's room. Izuku had honestly done nothing to deserve how we treated him. Most kids bullied him and ostracized him. We forced him to do our chores. We locked him outside till after curfew so he would be late. We ruined his belongings. We ruined his food. The staff never did anything to help him. If anything, they helped us. Mr. Agawa wouldn't stop us from ruining Izuku's food. Mrs. Hayashi, the nurse, refused to heal him, saying it was a waste. And Mrs. Kudos, the main director, did nothing to stop this. She would give Izuku punishments for stuff he didn't do. Us kids saw all this and realized we could be mean too. We took out our anger out on him. To get back to what happened, we broke into Izuku's room. We were going to ruin some of his stuff, but he was in there. He didn't seem to notice us walk in. Tatsuki dragged Izuku off his bed and threw him to the ground by Izuku's hair. He didn't fight back or move. He never did. Every time we had beat him up, he always just took it. Izuku was crying. Tatsuki and Haruki all started making fun of him for it and just made fun of him. All of a sudden, Izuku's whole demeanor and body changed. He jumped up, tackled Tatsuki, and started beating him up. I was frozen. This kid never fought back, and I honestly didn't know what to do. I snapped out of it and grabbed Izuku by his hair, since that was the only place that wasn't flying around. I got him off Tatsuki, who was passed out. Izuku turned on me and started beating me up. I honestly am surprised the damage he was able to do. I was almost double his size, but he took me down and beat me up. I wasn't lying when I said I don't remember much. I do remember trying to keep him there and then him kicking me. I did pass out. When I woke up, me, Tatsuki, Haruki, and Mr. Agawa met up to get our stories straight so that Izuku was the bad guy. We probably could have told the truth and gotten away since the police didn't care. We decided it would be safer not to press charges because then the case would be looked into and we would be in trouble. We also didn't think we would find Izuku. Mr. Agawa said something that still creeps me out today. He said that we wouldn't have to worry about Izuku again because he took care of him. I have no idea what he did, but I do know Izuku is alive. He saved me from being mugged. He saved my life even though I almost ended his. Hisashi was crying. Aizawa was in shock. I am so relieved he didn't start fights. Hisashi said, I am going to crush this group home. Aizawa said. Hisashi nodded in agreement. There was 2 more pages. Aizawa and Hisashi decided to just get it over with. PG-17. Nezu had written another statement here. Once I was done looking into his background, I looked into the incident that caused you to call me. Izuku was riding a bike somewhere when the tire popped. Izuku walked the bike for a while when he went to throw the bike away in an alley. For a while before this he was being followed by 5 kids. When he went into the alley they went in too. I couldn't see too much since there wasn't any good security camera around. I could only see a bit of what happened. It seems that the kids pushed him down then beat him up. One of the kids gave the leader a knife. That's when the stabbing happened. It looks like the kids try to drag the leader away, but the leader keeps going. The leader of this pack was Tatsuki Doi. The kid with the knife quirk was Haruki Hishida. The other 3 kids are unknown. It seems Tatsuki was taking revenge and tried to kill Izuku. On the next and last page was photos of Izuku entering the alley. The 5 kids entering the alley. Half of Izuku's curled up body, the rest of it covered by the corner of the building. It was his legs. The next was the kids leaving the alley. Then Izuku leaving the alley. He was bleeding and holding his stab wounds as best he could. Aizawa never thought he would see the pictures of the fight. He felt like throwing up. Hisashi chose not to look at the photos. Aizawa closed the folder. He couldn't believe what he read. He was angry, not at Izuku but at the people who had done this to him. Hisashi got up off the bed and started pacing. What should we do? I want Izuku to go to therapy. I want to hug him and never let him go. I want to murder the people who did this to him. No wonder he doesn't talk. What are we going to do? Should we tell him we know? How should we address this? Hisashi was asking this all very quickly. Aizawa, did T have any of the answers? I told Hitoshi he could read this, but I don't think I can show him this. I think we should tell him so we can help him. Everything makes so much more sense now. No wonder he hasn't trusted us, Aizawa said. Hisashi gave him a sad look. Aizawa got up and walked over to Hisashi. He wrapped Hisashi in his arms. They stood there for a while. I say we tell Hitoshi a shorter version of it so he knows what's going on. Why did he lie to us about his past? Hisashi said, then asked. I do T know Zashi. Aizawa said truthfully. They decided to talk to Hitoshi while Izuku was at work. Themselves talked to Izuku once he was back. Till then they tried to get some sleep. Neither Hisashi or Aizawa slept that night. Chapter 24, Fight or Flight. Summary. Izuku feels off all day. He was right to be worried. Notes. Chapter text. When Izuku was getting ready and grabbing breakfast, he signed a greeting to Hisashi. Hisashi seemed off but gave him a strained smile and waved back. Something was wrong. Izuku went back to the guest room and packed his stuff up just in case. He put the bag in a quick and easy place to grab so he could run out. Izuku left earlier than usual since he didn't like the weird vibe he was getting. Something was wrong but he didn't know what. He got to work. The whole day he felt off. Something was wrong and he didn't think he was being paranoid. He went on a roof a few houses down from the Yamada Aizawa family. He wanted to make sure no one other than those who belonged there were there. He waited for a few minutes past his usual home arrival time before going in. The house was too quiet. Izuku peeked around. He breathed a little easier when he saw the family all sitting on the couch. So if they hadn't been kidnapped or something, then why was Hisashi acting weird? Why was the house so quiet? Every time he had been here, and since he had been here every day around 3 when Hisashi got home, he played music. There was no music. It was making Izuku uneasy. He walked into the living room. Everyone seemed to jump at his entrance. Hitoshi was looking at him with shock. Hey Izuku, would you mind sitting down? We have something to talk about. You didn't do anything wrong at all. Hisashi didn't say it with his usual excitement. Izuku didn't like this one, but he really didn't like this. They were up to something. He thought he was safe here. He sat down but made sure he could get up quickly just in case. He sat in the only seat that had a view of the front door. He hadn't seen anyone out of place outside, and he couldn't hear anyone in the house, so that you'll have to show up while he was being talked to. So after your stabbing, we were really worried about you. We also had reasoning it was someone you knew, but you weren't telling us. So we had Nezu look into who did this so we could arrest them. This in turn led us into your past. Hisashi explained. Izuku stood up. He had no idea what his record said. He knew he was in some trouble for his exit of the group home. Kid, we aren't mad and we are not going to leave you because of this. We understand you were doing what you had to survive. Me, Hisashi, and Hitoshi want to hear your side. A lot of what's on your record says bad things about you, but we know you and know that you wouldn't do those things. Also, with discrimination, it's likely people would lie, Aizawa said. Izuku looked between the 3. They looked back at him. They had to be mad. He had lied to them. He had lied to each and every one of them. They are heroes. They can't have people who lie in their life. Izuku was a danger to them. He had to leave. They had looked into his past. They knew all the bad things he had done. Aizawa stood up. Izuku and him made eye contact. Izuku bolted towards the guest room. Aizawa was right after him. Izuku could hear Hisashi and Hitoshi get up too. Izuku ran into the room and grabbed his bag. He slammed the door, locking it, then started trying to open the window, but it didn't open fully. Stupid security. Izuku hated what he was about to do, but he had to get out. He slammed his elbow into the window. The glass didn't crack the first time, but the second time the glass broke. He cleared the glass of window, then kicked the screen away. He could hear yelling outside the door. Right as he was jumping out the window, the door slammed open. Izuku yelped and jumped from the second-story window. Tucking and rolling, he ran down the street. Aizawa not far behind. Izuku was fast and he knew he was, but he also knew he wasn't fast enough. He would be if he had enough of a head start, but Aizawa had been out that window right after Izuku. Aizawa was in eraserhead mode. Izuku wanted to switch to Cherub, but he didn't want Aizawa to figure him out. Who gives a fuck? I am never going to see them again. I need to get away. They are going to turn me in. Izuku ran into the nearest alley. He had to disable Aizawa for a bit. Izuku hugged the wall of the alleyway so that he would be behind Aizawa when he ran in. Aizawa ran into the alley. Izuku jumped forward and tried chopping him in the neck, but Aizawa was fast. Aizawa blocked and jumped away. Kid, we are not going to hurt you or anything. Izuku didn't want to put his guard down. He couldn't, so he did something he really didn't want to do. I know you are lying. You just wanted me to stay long enough to arrest me, Izuku said. His voice was rough from non-regularly being used. It did sound a little better since he had to use it at work sometimes. His voice threw off Aizawa for a second. Izuku could feel a presence behind him. He had left his back open to the entrance of the alley. He glanced back to see Hisashi at the entrance. He was so happy Hitoshi wasn't here to see this. Izuku reached into his bag, pulling out his knife. He wasn't going to hurt them badly, just enough to escape. He slipped a little into his Cherub persona. I really don't want to hurt either of you. Please let me go. Izuku backed to one side so his back was to the wall, and so both men were in his sight. Hisashi was suddenly in fighting position, but it was loose. A good part about being quirkless and siding weak was people underestimate you. They didn't know he was Cherub. Kid, this isn't the way to leave. We aren't lying, we are actually trying to help, Aizawa said as he moved closer. Izuku was so happy he didn't have his capture scarf. Please, Izuku, come back to the house, we can talk this out, Hisashi said. He also moved closer. Izuku had seen how Aizawa fought and how he got the upper hand. I am not going back, Izuku said, putting his knife into the right hold for fighting, then got into his fighting position. Aizawa got into a better position. Hisashi was still trying to talk Izuku down, but it was too late. Izuku feinted towards Aizawa, then running straight at Hisashi. Hisashi got into fighting position finally. Izuku tried to run past Hisashi. If he could get away without hurting either hero, he was going to. Hisashi jumped in front of Izuku. Izuku went to push Hisashi away, but the guy didn't budge. Hisashi was blocking his way out and Aizawa was coming up behind him. Move. No, you are coming back to the house. Izuku regretted it as soon as he did it, but he knew Aizawa wouldn't leave Hisashi if he was injured enough. Izuku punched Hisashi, who didn't really flinch, but one hand moved to block. When he did this, Izuku threw the knife. It hit Hisashi right below the right collarbone. Hisashi in shock looked at the knife wound. When this happened, Izuku kicked Hisashi in the side. Hisashi, not having his guard up, didn't see the next hit coming. Izuku had grabbed his other knife out of his bag and stabbed it into Hisashi's leg. Aizawa was right behind Izuku now, so Izuku ran. Aizawa surprisingly chased him, leaving a wounded Hisashi in the alley. Izuku wasn't fast enough. Aizawa caught up and grabbed him by his arm. Kid, stop, Aizawa said with finality. Izuku almost gave in, but he couldn't go back to foster care or to jail, and after what he did to Hisashi, he definitely was being sent back. Izuku switched fully into Cherub. He turned, driving his fist into Aizawa's face. Aizawa, being a hero, stood strong. That is what sucked for Izuku. He was fighting two professional heroes who could beat him easily. Izuku was not fully trained, but he did have the element of surprise since both Aizawa and Hisashi underestimate him. But this time Aizawa didn't do that. Izuku saw the hand headed for the nerve on his neck. He ducked down, then kicked his foot into Aizawa's knee. Aizawa was a hero, but he was also human. From what Izuku had seen, Aizawa and Hisashi were only using defensive moves. He didn't think they would hit him, but then again, who is he to trust adults? He made that mistake before, he would not make it again. Aizawa buckled a bit at the pain in his knee. Izuku then drove upwards again, driving his head into Aizawa's bent over head. Aizawa did react to this. Aizawa put space between him and Izuku. He was in fighting ready, but his nose was bleeding and he was favoring his non-injured leg. Izuku tried to think of a way to quickly end this. He did have anything in his bag that could help him. Izuku ran into the closest alley. There would be something there, hopefully. Aizawa chased after him, but a little slower this time. Izuku grabbed the lid of a trash can, then turned to face Aizawa. Please, kid, stop this stupid fight and come back. We are not going to arrest you or hurt you. We want you safe. Izuku didn't believe it. Adults had said similar things, then went and abandoned or beat Izuku. He had stabbed Hisashi twice. There was no way they would forgive him or let him go without punishment. Stop lying. Let me leave. I can't do that. I promised Hitoshi I would bring you home safe. Hitoshi wouldn't forgive him after stabbed his pops. Hitoshi loved Hisashi and Aizawa, but there were hints that he favored Hisashi a little. Hitoshi was going to kill him. Aizawa was coming at him. Shit, he had let Aizawa distract him. Izuku blocked the kick towards his side last second. While Aizawa was slightly off balance, Izuku slammed the side of the trash can into Aizawa's side. Aizawa blocked. Izuku used the trash can lid like a shield when Aizawa went to grab Izuku. Aizawa wasn't giving up. Izuku looked around at the alley, trying to find anything to help. The only thing in there was some trash. Izuku moved the two of them slowly towards the trash. Izuku and Aizawa kept dodging each other. Izuku got to the bags of trash. He reached in, keeping his eyes on Aizawa and the other hand holding the trash can lid like a shield. Izuku pulled out a fish head from the trash. He threw it at Aizawa, who made a grossed out face as he dodged. Izuku reached in again, grabbing the next thing, which was a takeout box, then threw it at Aizawa. It hit him in the chest. Aizawa looked down to see what hit him. Izuku ran forward, putting his momentum behind the lid. He drove it into Aizawa. Aizawa stumbled back, landing on his bad leg. Izuku swung the trash lid, hitting Aizawa in his good leg. Aizawa was trying to backpedal to keep space between them. Izuku kept running at him, making him back up as he swung the lid at Aizawa. They were back on the street when Aizawa tripped on the ending of the sidewalk, falling into the road. A car didn't stop in time, hitting Aizawa. Izuku ran. He didn't know what else to do. He knew Aizawa was probably gonna be fine. The car wasn't that big or going fast. He did know Aizawa was passed out. The bumper of the car had hit Aizawa's head. Izuku was fucked. He ran to his apartment, packing everything he needed, then left his apartment, disappearing into the red light district. Hitoshi. The last thing he had heard from his pops before he disappeared out the window was to stay put and wait. Hitoshi was nervous. He had woken up after Izuku left for work. Around lunchtime, his dad and papa had sat him down and told him the background of Izuku. He was frustrated that Izuku had lied to them, but he also understood that Izuku did it to protect himself. Hitoshi paced the entryway, waiting for his dads to get back with Izuku. Dad had promised to bring Izuku back safe. His phone rang. It was Pops. He picked up. "Hey Toshi, can you call Auntie Nem and have her come to the house?" his Pops said on the other side. He didn't sound right. "Want me to call right now?" Hitoshi asked. "Yes, I am headed home. Izuku got away from me, but your dad is after him." How had Izuku gotten away from Pops? He hung up, then found Auntie Nem's number. The phone rang a few times. "How is my favorite nephew?" "What's up, kiddo?" Auntie Nem asked. "Pops needs you to come to the house. I am not sure why. I will explain as best I can when you get here." "Okay, I am on my way." He could hear her running and her car starting. Hitoshi didn't want to admit it, but he was really happy she was coming. The phone call ended. A minute or two later, his Pops came through the door. Hitoshi gasped when he saw the two knives in his Pops. Had Izuku done this? What happened? His Pops walked into the house, then sat on one of the kitchen chairs before pointing to the cabinet under the sink. Hitoshi ran over, grabbing the first aid kit, then brought it to his Pops. As his Pops started doing first aid, the door opened. Auntie Nem dramatically entered the house. She saw Pops, then ran over, beginning to do first aid on Pops. "Hitoshi, please grab your other first aid kit. This one isn't stocked properly." "Hisashi, as much as I love doing first aid on stab wounds, why aren't you in the hospital?" Nem said the last part passive-aggressively. Hitoshi ran to grab the first aid kit in the bathroom. This one was better equipped. They kept the on in the kitchen for smaller accidents. He could hear his Pops and Nem talking. "I am waiting till Sho gets back. Me and him were chasing the same kid." "This is from a kid." "Yes." Hitoshi was sad not hearing his Pops' usual slang. He walked in as his Pops grimaced because Nem was trying to block any blood from seeping around the knife. This included putting pressure on the stab wound. "Did Izuku really do this?" Hitoshi asked. He knew Izuku was really the only one who could have done this, but he didn't want to believe it. He was pissed. "Yes, but he was in fight or flight. We were not letting him run, so he fought. He caught me by surprise." "Who is Izuku?" Auntie Nem asked. "He was my friend. He is a kid my age that Dad and Pops have been helping." Hitoshi said he was still angry even if he understood why Izuku did it. "The kid is quirkless. He was coming here for dinner once a week. Then one day he came here so injured he had to go to the hospital. We were worried, so we did a full background check. Izuku had been staying here for a few days since the wound. We told him we knew about his past and we tried to talk to him, but he ran into the guest room where he was staying, locked the door, then jumped out the window. Me and Sho gave chase. Aizawa was closer behind, so I didn't get there till a bit later, but Sho had Izuku in an alley. We boxed him, and when we did, he pulled a knife. We were trying to talk him down, but then he ran at me. I tried to use defensive and it worked, but in a movement I am still in shock about, he stabbed me in the shoulder, then stabbed me in the leg before running. Sho was too far to help me. He was going to stay with me, but I told him to get Izuku." His Pops said. "Holy shit," Auntie Nem said with a surprised look. Izuku had stabbed his Pops for trying to help him. "You were trying to help him and he stabs you," Hitoshi says angrily. "Toshi, Izuku has been through a lot and probably doesn't trust adults. I am not saying it was okay for him to stab anyone, but I do think he thought we were going to beat him up or something. He was so scared enough that he talked." Pops said. This got Hitoshi's attention. "He talked?" Hitoshi asked. "Yes." "Wait, why is talking crazy?" "Izuku is selectively mute. The 4 months we have knows him, he hasn't talked once." Pops explained. Auntie Nem nodded as she kept pressure on the wound. A phone started ringing. It was Pops. Pops picked it up without looking. "Sho, did you fin?" His Pops stopped. Everyone was quiet and the phone was loud. They all heard as an unfamiliar voice came through the phone. "Sir, this is EMT Hana. We responded to a phone call that involved your husband being hit by a car. We are headed to Musutafu General Hospital." Chapter 25. Maybe anger is okay. Summary. We see Aizawa. What happened to Izuku? Notes. Chapter text. Hitoshi, Auntie Nem and Pops all piled into Auntie Nem's car. Pops called the hospital letting them know he had 2 stab wounds and was on his way. They got there. His Pops was immediately carted off on a stretcher, leaving Hitoshi and Auntie Nem. Hitoshi was scared. He knew his Pops would be okay, but the call hadn't specified his dad's condition. He walked into the waiting room. They checked in. They were told to wait. Hitoshi was in a daze. Both his dads were in the hospital. They were both seeking medical care. It was all Izuku's fault. Hitoshi was angry. Hitoshi was angry at Izuku, to be more specific. All his dads were trying to do was help him. What does Izuku do? He stabs one and somehow gets the other in a car accident. If he ever saw Izuku again, he was going to punch him. Auntie Nem was trying to get him to talk, but he couldn't. He was so mad. They were called up by a doctor who showed them to his dad's room. Hitoshi ran and getting into the bed with his dad. His dad was still out. There was bandages around his head. His left arm was in a cast, so was his left leg. The right knee was in a brace. Hitoshi lay down next to his dad and hugged him. Izuku had done this to his dad. He hated Izuku. He laid there for a while hugging his dad. Nem came into the room after a bit. Hitoshi knew he missed the news of how his dad was, but he didn't care. He is going to be okay. He has a concussion, a broken arm, broken leg, and a sprained knee. They put him out so he wouldn't have to deal with his headache, and so they could reset his leg and arm. Your Pops is fine. They will put his bed in here too, since a double bedroom. I am so sorry, Toshi. Nem said this all while she walked over, ruffling Hitoshi's hair, then grabbed a chair to sit on. Hitoshi buried his face into his dad's side. After 2 hours, they brought his passed out Pops in. A doctor came in and told them that he would be fine, just needed to rest a bit. They had healed him, which took the energy out. Hitoshi got off his dad's bed and grabbed a chair to sit between the 2 beds. His Pops woke up half an hour later. They got him food and water. How is Sho? Azashi asked Auntie Nem. He has a level 3 concussion. They healed it mostly, so there shouldn't be any real symptoms other than a headache. His left arm and leg are broken from the car hitting him. His right knee is sprained. He will be fine, but they are having him sleep for a while. They can't heal the wounds till later. Apparently Chio is visiting the hospital tomorrow for volunteer work, so she will probably heal Sho then. His Pops turned to Hitoshi, opening his arms. Hitoshi hugged him. He was still pissed at Izuku. Aizawa. He opened his eyes to a dark room. He looked around. Hazashi was sitting in a chair next to his bed, holding his right hand. Hitoshi had his head on the bed asleep. Nimori was in a chair asleep by the door. Hazashi hadn't noticed he was awake yet. Aizawa squeezed Hazashi's hand, which made him look over. Hey Zashi. Hey Sho. They stayed there for a bit before Hazashi asked, what happened with Izuku? After a second he looked at Hitoshi to make sure he was asleep, then said, I chased after Izuku. I caught up to him. We had a small scuffle where he kicked me in the knee. Then he ran into an alley. He used a trash can lid as a shield and to try to hit me. After what happened with you, I decided I was out to fight and tried to incapacitate him. He either dodged or blocked almost all my hits. He can fight. He used the trash can lid to sprain me other knee. He is smart and resourceful. I wasn't expecting him to do some of the stuff he did. He threw trash at me to distract me, then ran at me. I backed up trying to create pace since he was swinging the trash can lid at me. I was trying so hard to dodge him and not mess up my knee more that didn't notice the sidewalk curb. I tripped and fell back. The last thing I remember was a look of panic on the kid's face, then I was out. Hazashi looked shocked. So Izuku got the better of you? Technically yes. I was also holding back because I didn't want to hurt him. Aizawa said. Hitoshi isn't doing well. He has barely spoken and the whole time has had an angry look on his face. Well, knowing him, he is probably pissed at Izuku and pissed this happened. Probably. Are you mad at him? I am frustrated. I know about his past and that he has been through a lot and doesn't trust people anymore, but at the same time I am frustrated that even though we have helped him for months now, he still didn't trust us. I am frustrated that he refused to listen to what we were saying. The only thing I am mad about is the fact he stabbed you, but I am trying to remember that we still don't know what his life has been like. We have an idea, but it's probably only the tip of the iceberg. How are you doing? I am having a lot of the same feelings, but I am also feeling a little betrayed. This kid who had always been nice and polite all of a sudden turned ruthless and unreadable. I feel like I have been tricked and I am frustrated that he lied about his past. We wouldn't have hurt him or judged him too much. I am still trying to wrap my head around the fact that the kid who literally felt bad for winning in a game just stabbed me twice. Aizawa nodded. The more he thought about it, the more a connection was being made. And something Hazashi just said caught his attention. Aizawa hated the thought he was having because that would mean that the kid had been tricking them for even longer. But it couldn't be. Izuku was a timid, scared kid, while Cherub was a ruthless vigilante that did anything to win a fight and to punish those who had done wrong. The problem was the more he saw of Izuku, the more it made sense. It first started when they were playing poker and the kid had the same unreadable expression. It was the same as Cherub's. The next was when Izuku was in the hospital. Aizawa saw some familiar scars on the kid's lower arms. Then it was when they were training and Izuku had the tank top on. He had a newer scar that was in the same place of the wound Aizawa had stitched up. When Izuku had changed his shirt, he had similar scars. Lastly was the way he fought. Izuku became ruthless when he was fighting. He was willing to go as far as stab Hisashi. He didn't want to admit most of this and he didn't want to believe it. He decided that until he had more definitive proof he wouldn't do anything. When should I be healed? Aizawa asked as he looked at his casted limbs. By the end of tomorrow when Chio comes in. Hisashi explained. When I am healed I am going to look for Izuku. What are you going to do if you find him? I am not sure. Hitoshi honestly was disappointed in his dads. They talked so loud. He woke up to them talking but stayed quiet because they were talking about Izuku. He knew they wouldn't talk about Izuku in front of him, so instead he listened. Well, knowing him, he is probably pissed at Izuku and pissed this happened. His dad said, probably. Are you mad at him? Pops, I am frustrated. I know about his past and that he has been through a lot and doesn't trust people anymore, but at the same time I am frustrated that even though we have helped him for months now, he still didn't trust us. I am frustrated that he refused to listen to what we were saying. The only thing I am mad about is the fact he stabbed you, but I am trying to remember that we still don't know what his life has been like. We have an idea, but it's probably only the tip of the iceberg. How are you doing? His dad. I am having a lot of the same feelings, but I am also feeling a little betrayed. This kid who had always been nice and polite all of a sudden turned ruthless and unreadable. I feel like I have been tricked and I am frustrated that he lied about his past. We wouldn't have hurt him or judged him too much. I am still trying to wrap my head around the fact that the kid who literally felt bad for winning in a game just stabbed me twice. His pops said. Hitoshi didn't like how much his dads talked when they thought he couldn't hear. They never talked about how they felt in front of Hitoshi. He felt like he was getting targeted most of the time because when he was mad at something he was told what was wrong, but then later would overhear his dads talking and find out they felt the same. When should I be healed? His dad asked. By the end of tomorrow when Chio comes in. Pops explained. When I am healed I am going to look for Izuku. Hitoshi froze. Why did they still care about him? He had attacked them. What are you going to do if you find him? I am not sure. Hitoshi had a few ideas of what to do. Later, when everyone was awake again, Hitoshi decided to dig a bit and see what his dads would tell him. He looked at his dad while they ate, then asked, Are you gonna keep looking for Izuku? Yes, it's my job as a hero to make sure he is safe. How are you going to find him? And if you do find him, what's going to happen? I honestly have no idea. If I find him, I am unsure of what I will do. I know he will probably not come with me. I don't want to arrest him or hurt him, so I will have to come up with something else. His dad shrugged. Why do you care? I know it's your job as a hero, but couldn't you have someone else take over? He threw you into traffic and stabbed Pops. He could have killed both of you. Toshi, he didn't throw me into traffic. I made a mistake and fell onto the road. Izuku tried to save me. I am mad that he stabbed your Pops, but I am also trying to remember that as much as we know about Izuku, we also have no idea. Most of the records were painting the abusers in a good light, so we don't know. I completely understand being frustrated and mad. It is totally okay to be mad and frustrated, but it's also important to see the other side of things. I am not saying you have to forgive him. I wasn't planning on it. Do you really care about finding him? Would it hurt to forgive him? Yes. I don't think he would respond well to other heroes try. What if you asked Cherub for help? He lives in the red light district, right? Hitoshi suggested. He couldn't pretend that the few months of friendship didn't happen. He was worried about Izuku. No one deserved what he was going through, but that didn't give him the excuse to go around stabbing people. I am not sure. He patrols there though. That's not a bad idea. Hitoshi was happy his dad agreed. They continued their regular conversation, trying to ignore the fact they were sitting in a hospital right now. Izuku. The image of Aizawa being hit by the car kept replaying in his head. He was worried and wanted to text Hitoshi, but after what Izuku did, he didn't think he would get much of a response, and he didn't know if he deserved one. Izuku felt like absolute crap for what he did. He knew he deserved any misfortune that happened to him. Izuku had quit his job, abandoned his apartment, and taken all his money out of the bank. He didn't want the police to find him. There was no forgiving him. Izuku didn't even look for a nice alley, he just slept on roofs. It had been 2 days before he went on patrol for the first time. He was happy to be back and loved being able to ship it off his mind and focus on saving people instead of Izuku's mindset of always worrying. Cherub ran across roofs. He was having fun. It felt freeing. He didn't have to worry about anyone. There was no need to make sure he went to bed on time so he could get up and work. There was just making sure he got from one roof to the other. He loved saving people. As much as he loved the fact someone was safe and not in danger, he liked being able to get his anger out on the asshole that had hurt an innocent person. Cherub was a lot more violent. He went where he felt like and didn't care. He was free. As he was running, he saw a familiar shape. He knew it was Eraserhead. Izuku was mad at them, not Cherub, so he would have to act normal. He didn't run from Eraserhead even though he really wanted to. He was fighting to keep Cherub fronting. Cherub stopped on the roof and waited for Eraserhead to get there. Before Eraserhead could say anything, he lifted his hands and signed. Cherub, the kid, I completely get it. Quick question. Do you live in the red light district or around other than your patrols? Aizawa asked. Cherub, no, I don't think you're stupid. I ask because I am looking for a kid. He ran away from me and a friend. He is really nice and needs to come home. I checked his usuals and he has disappeared. He emptied his bank account, quit his job, and left his apartment. He even left his phone there so it couldn't be tracked. Eraserhead explained. Izuku couldn't believe it. He was saying this to someone who wasn't Izuku. Cherub answered, trying to see what Aizawa would say. Well, he started as a friend of my kid, but then as he got closer to the family, we started taking care of him more. He got really hurt recently and was recovering with us. We made a mistake that caused him to run away. I am worried because he is in danger. I would wait, but I am honestly really worried, and because this is important to me. I also don't think he will come back on his own. Adults have mistreated him his whole life, so have most people. I think he thinks we are the same. I want to make sure he is safe and let him know we still care about him. I was hoping you could keep an eye out for him and let me know if you see him. Cherub asked. Thank you, Cherub. His name is Izuku Sasaki. He is about 13 but looks 11. He has green hair, green eyes, and covered in freckles. He has 2 major scars on his face, on crossing his forehead, the other on his jawline to mid-cheek. Here is a picture of him. Don't try to grab him. He will fight and he is resourceful and smart. Aizawa said this while giving Cherub the picture. Cherub looked at the picture, studied it, then put it in his pocket. Thank you. Eraserhead said this, then ran off to go on potholes. Cherub continued his patrol. When out of sight, Izuku came back. Izuku couldn't believe what he heard. It wasn't like Eraserhead knew Cherub was Izuku, so he wasn't talking to Izuku. He had said everything he had to Cherub. Maybe they would forgive him. No, they couldn't. Chapter 26, Solitude. Summary. Izuku's being homeless again. Notes. Chapter text. The only thing keeping Izuku alive was his job as Cherub. The fact he was helping those in need made him get up and eat. He had been sleeping on different roofs for the last few weeks. It was almost a month since he ran. He has been staying away from anywhere that the Yamada Aizawa family would regularly go to. As much as he understood why they did it, he hated that they looked him up. They had somehow found out his old name and then somehow got access to his file. He knows it was probably to protect themselves, but Izuku was still pissed at them. The part he hated the most was he had to act like he wasn't mad when around Aizawa as Cherub, since Cherub has no reason to be mad at Aizawa. Aizawa had recently been opening up to Cherub, which was usually funny because it was just Aizawa talking about his life. Cherub wasn't supposed to know, so it was funny when he had to act like he didn't know. The stuff Aizawa was saying was about his family. Izuku was pretty sure this was to get Cherub's trust, because how can you not trust someone you know a lot about? Well, it wasn't working. They had started patrolling together more. Aizawa said it was for training, but it was probably to keep an eye on Cherub. He would be lying if he said he didn't trust Aizawa at all. He didn't trust him when it was Izuku and Aizawa, but if it was Eraserhead and Cherub, there was trust. They had rescued each other so many times and trusted their lives with the other. Izuku just didn't trust him enough to speak yet or tell him who he was. He had started making jokes and signing more when they took breaks, but that was so it wasn't awkward. After what happened a month ago, Izuku doubted if he would ever trust Aizawa or any of that family again. The weirdest part to Izuku was the fact he had to pretend to look for himself. Every night Aizawa asked if he had heard anything or saw anything. Izuku always said no. This made Aizawa visibly change. Izuku couldn't place the feeling Aizawa was feeling on his face, but it was a weird face. Why was he so worried? I don't deserve anything they did, and I don't deserve their worry. I literally stabbed his husband twice. Maybe he is pretending to be worried so Cherub will look for me, while in reality he is trying to find me to punish me. Aizawa knows Cherub hates kids getting hurt, so he is probably just pretending to want to help. Izuku thought all this while he's setting his bed up. He was on a roof. He had bought a small bed pad to put over the concrete so it wasn't so hard. Then he would cuddle into his sleeping bag that was lined with 2 blankets. It was summer, but with how high up he was, the wind was constant and cold. He fell asleep after patrol around 4 a.m., which that early in the morning was chilly. As the sun came up, he would shed a blanket or 2 and be left with just the sleeping bag. When Izuku first ran away, it would take him a while to sleep, since a few months on a futon or mattress had ruined his tolerance of where he could sleep. It was coming back very quickly though. It was coming back too well, because he would find himself stuck in his sleeping bag for most of the day. He didn't have the energy to get up. His body felt heavy, and moving it took effort. It was getting harder and harder to get up. He didn't have the energy to live anymore. Cherub was soloing his patrol. As much as Izuku loved patrolling with Aizawa, he liked patrolling by himself more. He wasn't keeping an act up. He didn't have to be perfect. He was his imperfect, sad self. When Izuku was sad, he got angry. He didn't know why this happened, but it just did. He would get so frustrated and mad with himself. He hated that he had a hard time getting up. He hated that he was so tired it was hard to move. He hated that the only thing keeping him alive was being Cherub. He was tired of it all and was frustrated with himself. What was there to be sad about? He is alive, he has money, he has food, he has a comfy place to sleep, there are people at least pretending to care. What was he sad about? When patrolling, he could get this anger out. He will admit that he did hurt the villains he apprehended, but they were trying to hurt him too, so it was fair game. Izuku liked patrolling alone because then he could do what he wanted, like taking his anger out on deserving bad guys. When with Aizawa he couldn't, because even if they are doing something bad doesn't mean you can break their bones and give them concussions. Izuku didn't care what Aizawa said, but he also knew Aizawa would turn on him if he did do something wrong. Izuku hated admitting it, but Aizawa was the last person that cared. If Aizawa left Cherub, then Izuku thinks Cherub would be done, and so would Izuku. Izuku decided to take a break about halfway through his patrol. He stopped on his favorite roof. Climbing up on top of the roof access door, he sat on it. It was kinda funny that he sat up there since he was already on a roof, but then decided he needed to be higher. He also liked it since it was pretty small. It had enough room for a staircase to come up and a door to be placed, but it was still pretty small. Izuku didn't have a snack, so he pulled out his phone. He missed his Izuku phone because it was more personalized to him, while his Cherub phone, the one he had, was just Aizawa's contact. Izuku only charged it to text Aizawa. He looked at the last text they sent. "Are you going to patrol tonight, kid?" Homeless hero. "Yes, I am soloing tonight. I have business to attend to." Cherub. "Okay." Homeless hero. They were very dry testers. It was always just to get the point across. Izuku hated that this had become his life. He tossed the phone to the other side of the roof access, then pulled his knees up to his body so he was in a fetal position. Laying his chin on his knees, he looked at the view. He realized he was looking towards the Yamada Aizawa household. Before he could stop it, his eyes welled up with tears. He couldn't stop himself when the tears started falling. He was crying hard, and Izuku hated it. He wasn't supposed to cry. Cherub was a strong, numb person, but here he was bawling his eyes out on a roof. What did I do to deserve all this shit? Was I rude as a child? Why can't things go well for me? All I want is somewhere safe to be for even 5 seconds. When will I get a break? It isn't fair. What did I do? Izuku was sobbing. He was shaking. Sobs racked his body. It was honestly painful. His mask was soaked. He took it down some so he could breathe. His breaths were shaky, with a new sob building with every intake. The taste of salt lined his lips as the tears ran down his face. The past 2 years found their way out of his body. The abandonment of his mother, his treatment at the group home, his last day there, his time surviving on the streets, his fight for a home, the stabbing, him running away, and finally his arrival on the street again. It all crashed into him. He was angry, sad, and frustrated. He was overheating so much he flipped his hood off, then took off the balaclava that hid the bottom half of his face and hair. When he was done crying, he curled up as much as he could, trying to fill the emptiness that now consumed him. He was tired. His eyes stung. His whole face felt sticky. He wiped his nose. The only thing that really reminded him he was alive was the chilly night wind glowing through his hair. He stared off at the lights of the city. He was so peaceful. He wanted to stay like this forever. A chill had him putting all his equipment back on. He couldn't break the serenity by getting up and leaving, so he stayed there curled up, staring off into the distance. He stayed like this until the first signs of the sun coming up. He was brought back by his phone going off. He looked down to see it was from Aizawa. "I think I found where Izuku has been sleeping. There is a whole sleeping setup on the roof I am on." I looked in the bag. It has some of Izuku's stuff in it. "Can you get here to help me search nearby for him?" Attached to this was a location. Izuku didn't need the directions to get there. It was where he had been sleeping. He had to do damage control, so he ran as fast as he could there. He did make sure his mask was on correctly before getting there. His body was full of dread. When he got there, Aizawa was 2 roofs over. "I wanted to make sure I didn't scare the kid. I just want to see him and make sure he is okay. I don't have a plan for what to do, but if I can see him, that's all I need." Aizawa said this. There was something in his voice that Izuku didn't recognize. Izuku wanted to see how much Aizawa would say, so he played dumb and asked, "Cherub. He was living with us for a while when he got really badly hurt one day. We wanted to see who was after him, so we looked into his past to make sure he was safe and maybe punish the people that had hurt him, but we found some very worrisome stuff. When the kid got home from work, we talked to him and said we looked into his past. He ran away. Me and my husband tried to catch him and bring him back, but he misunderstood and thought we were going to hurt him, so he fought his way out, then disappeared. I have been looking for him for a month. I am really worried because he has enemies out and about." Izuku wanted to see what Aizawa thought and knew about his past. To be honest, Izuku didn't know what was on his record. He knew there was probably a lot of lies on it, and he knew his school record was trash. He had no idea if there was anything about what happened in the foster home. Izuku has been mistreated and abused his whole life. most of this from adults so he doesn't trust them. I don't blame him. We tried to specify that we weren't mad or anything, but he wouldn't listen and ran. Me and my husband went after him to get him to come back. We messed up. We didn't let him leave. We completely ignored his request to leave, only focusing on the fact that we thought we would help. We backed Izuku into a corner. He did what felt like was needed and stabbed my husband. I chased after him. I wasn't mad, I was frustrated and I wanted the kid safe. I made a stupid mistake and tried to take him back forcefully. He fought back and I ended up in the hospital. I am not mad at the kid, he was doing what he thought he needed to survive. I still have no idea what happened to him. His record was a giant lie, I know that much. Aizawa seemed to be actually mad at himself. Izuku couldn't believe it. Was he really trying to help? Aizawa had become more open about his life, but never this open. A bit ago, Aizawa told Cherub that Hisashi was his husband but didn't say Hisashi was present Mike. Aizawa still hadn't said Hitoshi's name. I am more sad that he felt his only way to survive was stabbing Hisashi. Like I said, I don't know his past, so I can't make a guess. But also me and Hisashi are the ones that pushed the kid too far. We could have given him space or could have explained it more and build more trust before bringing it up. We made the mistake, not Izuku. I still wonder if we had let him go and have some space for a bit, if he would have come back and talked to us. I think the reason he hasn't come back is he feels guilty and probably thinks we hate him. Me and Hisashi have been really worried and doing all we can to find him. We want to make sure he is okay. Izuku didn't think there was a lie in that whole little speech. He then wondered himself if he would have returned. He didn't know. This was the question Izuku really cared about. My son has become less angry, but he is mad that Izuku did what he did to me and Hisashi. We have tried explaining to him what I have said, but it doesn't change anything. Me and Hisashi have decided to leave it and let him decide after a while. Izuku wasn't surprised that Hitoshi was mad at him. He didn't think he would be forgiven. They waited there for a while. Both Aizawa and Izuku were getting antsy, but for different reasons. Aizawa wasn't going to leave until Izuku showed up. The only problem was Izuku was here next to him waiting for himself to show up. He had to leave. Izuku didn't like that Aizawa had found his spot, but that was okay, he could just move. What he was worried about is he didn't know how long Aizawa was willing to stay here. Izuku asked, "I have work, so I do have to leave soon." Aizawa answered without taking his eyes off the building that Izuku's stuff was on. This question made Aizawa reluctantly look down at his watch. He made a weird face, then got up from his crouched position. "Damn, I got to go, kid. Do you mind staying here and waiting? If you do and see Izuku, could you send me a picture of him?" Izuku signed. "It's all right." Aizawa then ran off. Izuku sat there for a while before going to his things. He changed, then packed all his stuff up. He picked it up, probably looking like a pack mule. He headed in random direction till he found a roof he was willing to sleep on. He didn't return to the alleys because he didn't want to deal with the territory battles. There are no territory battles over roofs, so he stayed up here. He was also a lot more comfortable on roofs. There was less chance of someone being able to sneak up on you, and he wasn't bothered. The only problem was if it was raining, he didn't really have a place to stay dry. He had been sneaking into roof access alcoves if it did rain, or hiding in abandoned buildings. The problem was if you were in an abandoned building, it usually wasn't actually abandoned. If it wasn't completely condemned, then the building was occupied with homeless people, gangs, drug dealers, and other illegal things. For a while Aizawa didn't find him, but Izuku kept moving every few nights. He didn't stick to a pattern, and he really did try not to sleep on the same building. This all didn't matter because Aizawa started finding him almost regularly. Izuku was brought back to when Eraserhead first started to find Cherub. He had found Cherub because most of his patrols crossed around the same building, so if Eraserhead stayed in the area long enough, he would see Cherub. Izuku was trying to figure out what was making him predictable. The only way he knew Aizawa kept finding him was the fact Cherub would get a location sent with a request for a picture of Izuku. Cherub was running out of excuses for not going and taking a picture. Tonight he had gotten the location text and a request to go there. Izuku went and joined Aizawa on his watch of Izuku's stuff. Aizawa was getting more frustrated and impatient. Izuku did find it slightly funny, but also kinda creepy. Izuku decided to ask the question that had been bothering him. Every roof he picks is a concrete one. Most buildings nowadays are gravel, and Izuku never sleeps on them. He always goes for the concrete ones. He also stays in the red light district, which for as big as it is isn't that big. He also avoids apartment buildings. It's always office or business buildings. When I am on patrol, if I see one of these roofs, I bookmark the location. Then I go around and look at the roofs. Aizawa answered. Izuku hated the fact he was so predictable. He would change what he was doing, but if he just randomly did that, Aizawa might connect the dots. I just want to see him. I need to know he is okay. Cherub, I am so worried about this kid. I keep seeing reports of dead bodies in this district since I patrol here, and every time I am terrified it's Izuku. At this point, Hisashi and my son are worried too. I see his stuff but never see him. I am worried that it's actually not his stuff, that it was stolen from him. He hasn't shown up anywhere. He completely disappeared. I am really worried about Hisashi. He is more worried than me and it's affecting him a lot. He blames himself since it was his idea to talk to Izuku. He hasn't been sleeping well and it's starting to show. Izuku looked at Aizawa and was surprised to see he was being completely serious. Why was he telling him this? Izuku signed. We are worried because we know technically how he is living the thing as we only know where he sleeps. We haven't seen a glimpse of him. We are worried because of all the questions this causes. Why is he out all night? Is he fed? Is he healthy? In the few months I knew him I started to really know him. He even lived with us for a bit. This kid became part of our family. Izuku knew this was slightly a suspicion question, but he didn't believe what Aizawa was saying and he needed answers. I have said it before and I will say it a billion times more. He is a hurt kid who was scared. He probably lied because he didn't want us to think of him differently. The other reason I need to get him back is I can't have him thinking we were going to hurt him. I need to prove his history wrong. His record said he was a horrible kid. He started fights, was lazy, didn't care. But me and Hisashi looked into it more. We checked video footage and interrogated his schools. All the records were a lie. He was a quiet kid that minded his own business. From the age of 5, Izuku has been betrayed and hurt by those he thought he could trust. I refused to become a part of that. Izuku was frozen. No one had fought for him. No one cared. Aizawa and Hisashi cared. It was getting harder and harder to say it was a lie or an act. If it was an act, it was a very good one because Aizawa never broke character. He genuinely seemed to be worried. Izuku had done so much wrong, but this family still cared. He still could go back. Hitoshi was mad at him still from what he could tell. He didn't want to bring more hurt to the family than he already had. Izuku was a horrible person, he decided. They stayed on that roof until Aizawa had to leave. Aizawa said he would stop worrying if he saw Izuku. Izuku decided to show himself. Chapter 27, My Power is Out. Chapter text. So a big storm hit where I live and now we don't have power. On one side of my road is flooded 3 feet deep for a mile. And the other way off my road is completely blocked by a downed tree that landed on power lines. My power line is in the flooded area. The power place shut off our line when the flooding started. All of this is to say I probably won't update because I literally have no way to charge anything but my phone and I am using it for emergencies only. Sorry, but posting a chapter isn't an emergency. I am sorry. We are out of drinkable water. Don't have a way out of our house. For a bit of context, my house is in the middle of the woods. The nearest store is 10 miles away. And there is no way to get a vehicle out, so we kinda stuck. My power isn't gonna be on for a while lol. I hope you guys have a better Christmas than I am cause we don't even know if the power will be back on by then. Chapter 28. Update on my situation. Summary. Trigger warning, there is mention of death. Chapter text. So we now have a way to leave the house. They fixed the power line so it's okay now. I had to go help my elderly neighbor and we ended up canoeing into town to get supplies and did some volunteer work. I might end up in the news face with tears of joy. My power isn't on yet, but we did get a generator since we won't have power for a week. Something scary that I honestly wasn't expecting was someone died. One of my neighbor's dogs got out and ran into the flood water. The owner ran in after the dog. The dog got out safely, but sadly my neighbor didn't. He ended up getting swept. We have had emergency people on our road for the last 2 hours. It is really scary. All of this is to say if any of you are in a natural disaster, please listen to advice given by the authority. Do not swim in flood water. Do not drive through flood water. Do not drink flood water. And please, please, please be safe. Thank you to all those who commented well wishes. You have no idea how much they have been helping. The author curse is real BTW. I am writing the next chapter right now since we have a system up and can charge stuff. Have a wonderful day. Chapter 29. Trouble sometimes makes rubble. Summary. Aizawa and Green Cherub time. Eat up you gremlins. Notes. Chapter text. Aizawa didn't like venting onto Cherub. Cherub had been there so much and saw everything. Aizawa knew he had been acting differently. He hadn't even trained with Cherub since they returned back to patrolling together after the whole Izuku thing. Aizawa had been trying to tell Cherub more. He was hoping it would cause Cherub to open up more, but it wasn't really working. He would do more for Cherub, but right now Izuku was one of his main Eraserhead duties. He did trust Cherub with a lot. They had saved each other many times, and since they were working together more and more, Aizawa had to admit that he was beginning to look at Cherub as a partner. He could never call Cherub a sidekick. Cherub was too skilled to be called a sidekick. Aizawa had been trying to track down Izuku for a while, but nothing had come up until he came upon Izuku's thing. He felt bad going through the bags, but he needed to make sure it was Izuku. When he found things he recognized as Izuku, he moved a few buildings over so he could still see if Izuku was on the roof but wasn't too close. He crouched down so he wasn't so visible, then pulled out his phone and texted Cherub asking him to get there. Cherub was living up to his name. He had never complained about putting their things on hold to help with Izuku. He felt weird at first for asking for Cherub's help, but Cherub covered ground Aizawa couldn't. Cherub also seemed to care. He asked questions and checked in. Aizawa was happy to have Cherub to help. He felt bad dragging him into this. He was actually thinking of dragging him in more by having Cherub go talk to Izuku and do a check-in. Izuku was a sensitive topic at their home right now. Hazashi was worried about Izuku. Hitoshi was also worried but was also still mad at Izuku. If Izuku was mentioned, the conversation would die in quietness as everyone didn't feel like talking about it more. Him and Hazashi do talk about it sometimes. At some point Hazashi brought Aizawa the investigation he had been doing. Hazashi had been looking into Izuku's records and making sure they were real. He had showed Aizawa because he needed help looking into Izuku's middle school and elementary school. There was a lot of footage to review and people to look into. Hazashi had Nezu get a warrant so they could investigate the school. Everything they found made them sick. For years Izuku was bullied horribly. The whole time Izuku never fought back. Never once did Izuku instigate a fight. It wasn't only just the students either, it was the teachers too. Aizawa had read a few of Izuku's online assignments to find they were 100 but had been graded 45 seconds or less. The teachers could be seen purposely throwing away Izuku's guard and say Izuku lost it. They even purposely avoided fights so they didn't have to stop them. Aizawa and Hazashi were livid. Hazashi and Aizawa even looked into other things that were on his record. They talked to Deiji Chiba. Deiji repeated everything he had said in his updated statement. The kid stood by his word, repeating that Izuku never did anything. Deiji wouldn't say how Izuku saved him, just that he didn't have to but did. All of this had Aizawa and Hazashi livid at the people who did this to Izuku but also made them proud of Izuku. Izuku had been through so much but still was a kid person who continued to do his best. Hazashi and Aizawa decided they didn't want to be part of the people who betrayed him. They needed to find Izuku and talk to him to set everything straight. They wanted Izuku to at least have one adult that didn't betray him or hurt him. So when Aizawa started discovering Izuku's things regularly, this became his mission. He needed to right this wrong. Aizawa was worried about Izuku currently because it was weird. Izuku was never in bed at night. Izuku was never there. Unless the kid knew when Aizawa would find him, then it didn't make much sense. The other thing that worried Aizawa was when he looked in Izuku's bags, he saw nothing that involved food. How was the kid eating? Aizawa had been thinking, and while it did make sense for Izuku to be Cherub, it also really didn't. Cherub was hanging out with Aizawa days after the whole Izuku thing. Also, Cherub seemed healthy and okay, while Izuku has probably lost weight and doesn't look great since it's been 2 months. Aizawa decided he would be pretty happy if Izuku and Cherub were the same person, because then Izuku was okay, and that would mean getting both kids off the street at once. Aizawa was staking out Izuku's spot a few buildings over. He had texted Cherub yet. He wasn't planning to text Cherub since the kid had already done enough. Aizawa was there for 30 minutes when he saw movement. A fluffy head popped up, so Aizawa could see Midoriya standing on the building. Aizawa wasn't surprised when he saw Izuku was more skinny and just didn't look great. From his position he could make out mats in the kid's hair, the clothes hanging off his body. Aizawa took a picture for Hazashi so he could see he was mostly okay. Izuku got into his sleeping bag. Aizawa felt weird watching the kid sleep. He pocketed his phone then left. Later in his patrol he met up with Cherub. After seeing Izuku, there was no way Izuku and Cherub were the same person. Cherub was built with muscle to him. He didn't smell bad and he was more confident. Izuku was the opposite of this. Cherub, I finally got a glimpse of Izuku. Aizawa showed Cherub the picture. He is pretty sure he could see the grimace under the mask. He hoped that would mean Cherub would help Aizawa with Izuku. They sat in silence eating a snack. I thought seeing him would help me stop worrying or give me an idea of what to do, but neither have happened. I hate saying it, but I have no idea what to do. Cherub nodded then signed. Aizawa didn't know whether Cherub was being sarcastic or not. Cherub had started talking more and was actually making jokes. The problem was you can't really convey sarcasm with sign language. Aizawa decided to take it as a serious suggestion. Maybe. With the look Cherub gave him, he realized it was sarcastic. He was too tired for this. Come on, kid, I am looking for actual suggestions, Aizawa said half seriously. Cherub shrugged. They continued their patrol. Cherub wanted to check out this one abandoned building that he was pretty sure had some villain activity. Villains found they were more likely not to get caught if they hid an abandoned building, which was sadly true. Aizawa had a lot of ground to cover, so he didn't have time to search every single abandoned building. He knew it was an excuse, but it was the truth. Cherub had been picking up what Aizawa couldn't do, being one man and all. A few buildings over from the target building, they checked their gear and reviewed the map Cherub had drawn out. It wasn't a great map, but it was better than going in blind. It was an old office building. It was 3 stories tall. It had some side halls, but the good majority of the building was cubicle space. From what Cherub said, most of the cubicles were gone, so the only real color was pillars and hallways. After some arguing, they decided to go in separately. Izuku on the far side and Aizawa on the closest. Before they went in, they were going to lock as many exits as they could. The goal was to have Izuku push them towards the exit they wanted, which was where Aizawa would be ready to ambush. Aizawa hated the idea of going in separate. Aizawa wanted to wait for backup, but from what Izuku said, the security was high enough that the loudness of backup would backfire. They both did have Naomasa on speed dial, and the detective knew where they were but was a mile out, so it wasn't suspicious. Eraserhead nodded at Cherub. Cherub and Aizawa went around the outside of the office building, blocking any exits they could. Then with a thumbs up from Cherub, they headed to their spots. Izuku was starting on the 3rd floor, while Aizawa was to start on the 1st floor. The goal was to meet on the 2nd floor where the deal should be happening. Aizawa was nervous for Cherub, but he knew Cherub could hold his own. He was very impressed with how far the kid had come from when they first met. Aizawa was pretty sure the kid could put up a pretty good fight against him now. He knew Izuku could fight up to 7 people. It was still scary since they didn't know how many people would be in the building or what the quirks were. Aizawa went through a window on the side of the 1st floor. Landing as softly as possible, he started his sweep of the floor. He had to stop and duck once when a lookout placed by the stairs called someone. "All clear down here, boss." After the guard hung up, Eraserhead took them out. He put quirk suppression cuffs on the person and covered their mouths so if they woke up early they couldn't yell for help. He then took all weapons at ways to communicate, putting them way out of reach. He sent a text to the Cherub, Naomasa and Eraserhead group chat saying the 1st floor was clear and that there was 1 guard. A second later, Cherub said the 3rd floor was clear and that there were 2 guards on the 3rd floor. Eraserhead then went up the stairs but stayed on the landing out of sight. He used his phone camera to see how many people were there. There were 15 villains and 7 people tied up and gagged. Human trafficking. Cherub was going to come down the stairs on the other side of the building, then after accessing the situation would show himself while locking that staircase. Aizawa was to stop any villain from leaving the building by guarding the staircase and joining the fight once villains stopped running for the stairs. Cherub sent a text saying he was going in. After 2 minutes, Naomasa and the rest of the backup was supposed to join the raid. Eraserhead could hear the second Izuku showed himself. He could hear 2 people heading his way, so he stood up showing himself too. He sent his scarf out wrapping around the 2 people, then pulled on his scarf, causing the 2 to collide and hit their heads. Aizawa ran forward quickly, putting cuffs on them. More people were heading his way. Aizawa got into fighting position. The first person reached him. He swept their feet from under them, causing them to fall. The next person tripped on the other guy. Aizawa kicked the tripped guy in the head, causing him to pass out on top of the other guy. A chair came flying at Aizawa. He dodged, then looked for who threw it. This guy was using telekinesis to float 2 more chairs ready for throwing. The first quirk. Aizawa activated Erasure, causing the chairs to fall. The guy stomped like a child. A knife went flying towards Aizawa. He just barely dodged it, but it caused him to blink. All of a sudden, the room filled with some type of fog or smoke. Aizawa was nervous since he couldn't see Cherub. The smoke or fog didn't seem to be poison, so he continued on. Aizawa backed up so he was still able to guard the stairs. He could hear fighting but couldn't see it. Aizawa heard a scream. He didn't care about guarding the door anymore. Naomasa would be here any second, so most of these people would be caught. There were civilians in the building still that he needed to rescue. He was also hoping he could find Cherub. Aizawa reached the victims. "I am the hero Eraserhead. I am here to get you out safely," Aizawa explained as he got to the first person. He was only able to see arm's length clearly. The first person was a male in his mid-20s. Aizawa took off the gag, then untied him. The guy got up and started helping Aizawa untie the others. Once they were all free, he showed them to a side hallway where they could hide until they could be evacuated from the building safely. This was usual protocol, but Aizawa couldn't see and he didn't want these people hurt anymore, so he wasn't about to send them blindly to the stairs and hope they made it. This way he knew where they were while the villains didn't. Aizawa headed for the sound of fighting but was surprised to bump into Cherub. Aizawa signed to Cherub. Cherub shrugged. Aizawa said in disbelief. Cherub shrugged again. They would have laughed if it wouldn't have given their position away. Cherub. They heard someone yell, then the sound of someone hitting the ground. There was a cheer until the fog cleared and it showed all of the villains had just beaten up one of their own members. What the fuck? Where did the bastard go? The villains started looking around until they saw Eraserhead and Cherub standing there watching in amusement. After a second of awkward staring, everyone got into fighting position. The only problem is no one moved, so it was more of a staring match. By the fact the room wasn't filling up again, it looked like the passed out person was the one with the smoke quirk, or after what happened they decided it was a better idea not to blind everyone. Cherub was the first to move. He ran forward and started fighting the closest person. This got everyone moving again. Aizawa lost sight of Cherub in the fray. He was a little nervous, something felt off. He wanted to keep the kid in eyesight. His suspicion that something was about to go wrong was very real. As he was fighting a few people, the building shook. One of the opponents swore and tried to get away. Something was wrong and the villains knew it. The villains were trying to get away. Cherub and one villain were still in a fight. They didn't seem to notice the rumbling. The guy Cherub was fighting was getting larger every time G hit him. Every time the villain grew, the building rumbled a little. In Aizawa's distraction, some villains were heading downstairs. Aizawa tried to keep fighting them, but their only concern was leaving. Cherub was wising up because he started just trying to defend himself. Aizawa tried to erase the guy's quirk, but it wasn't working. Every time he made contact with Cherub, he grew a little. Cherub was holding his own very well, so Aizawa decided it was better to try and get everyone out of the building. Aizawa ran upstairs, grabbing the two villains Cherubs had taken out and hoisted them over his shoulder, then ran to the main floor where he passed the villains off to two police officers who had apprehended the villains that had escaped. Aizawa then ran back up the stairs, grabbing any passed out villains on the floor, then ran downstairs. Once anyone wishing harm was gone, Aizawa ran up the stairs again to grab the victims. He got to the door, knocked, and announced it was him. The door opened and people poked their heads out. As Aizawa escorted them out of the building, one of the more rough-looking victims pulled him aside. I have been in this organization enough to know that the villain the other hero is fighting will bring down the building. He gets bigger every time he hits someone because it gives him energy. He takes energy from his opponents. He will either fight until your buddy is dead or until the building goes down. He always survives. Repeat what you said to any police officer so they can call anyone in the building out. The man nodded, then ran up to a police officer. Aizawa ran back in to get Cherub. Cherub was a kid. He didn't deserve to be crushed. He was right in time. The villain was gaining the upper hand while Cherub was becoming more and more sluggish. Aizawa jumped into the fight and started taking hits and throwing them. The villain wasn't backing off, and it wasn't giving Izuku or Aizawa a way to escape, so they were stuck fighting. Aizawa made some space, then yelled to Cherub, who was on the side of the fight, visible, out of breath and tired. The building is going down. You need to leave. Get out now. Cherub looked at him with shock, then shook his head. Why couldn't he just listen? Kid, I will be fine. Get out now while you still can. Aizawa was desperate. The building was visibly starting to cave where the villain stood. The villain was getting bigger in size by the second. At any moment the floor would give and the whole building would go down too. He needed Cherub to leave now. Cherub, one of us needs to make it out to tell the other's family, so get the fuck out of the building before I make you get out, Aizawa said in a harsh voice. Cherub looked at the door out, then looked back at Aizawa, a new resolve showing in his eyes. If they made it out of here alive, Aizawa would be giving him a very stern talking too. Aizawa would yell more, but the energy was being sucked out of him. All of a sudden Cherub joined the fight, but Aizawa didn't leave it. Together they were trying to get the upper hand on the villain, but any hit they landed didn't seem to hurt the villain, and they couldn't make enough space to escape. Only one of them could escape, and it wasn't going to be Aizawa. He had a responsibility as a hero to save every civilian, even if it meant his life. Cherub was still a civilian. Aizawa was trying to think of a way to get Cherub out when it became too late. The floor went out from beneath them, and soon the floor above came down. Aizawa dove for Cherub and covered the kid's body with his own. Darkness. His face was being tapped. He could hear a voice saying his hero name. Where was he? Who was tapping him? Everything hurt. His whole body ached. With the pain came back the memory of what happened. He tried to open his eyes, but it was dark. Was he alive? A voice called his name. Eraserhead. Wake up. He recognized the voice, but he didn't know from where. He knew his eyes were open, but he couldn't see anything. He reached down to his utility belt and pulled out the little flashlight he kept on him. When he clicked the flashlight on, he could suddenly see everything. They were in a tiny space. The air was filled with dust, but it was settling. There was barely enough room for both Cherub and Aizawa to be there. Cherub must have moved them because they were sitting facing each other, their legs in a tangled mess. They were crouched down since sitting up fully wasn't an option. How long was I out? Aizawa asked. He placed the flashlight so it was pointing at the wall, illuminating their little cave. GC. They sat there for a while just staring at each other. Aizawa looked around the space, trying to see if there was any way to talk with the people outside. If there were still people outside. Aizawa pulled out his phone, but it was pretty broken. After a moment. Aizawa could see in the kid's eyes he was nervous. Aizawa didn't want to lie to the kid, but he didn't want the kid to panic or make him more scared than he was. Aizawa forgets it sometimes, but Cherub is a kid and is probably scared. There was a good chance a rescue team was trying to get to them right now, but he couldn't be sure. He hoped there was a rescue team looking for them. But there was also the chance they assumed both of them were dead and now are taking their time to get to them. He decided he couldn't lie and he didn't know, so he answered truthfully. Naomasa. Naomasa didn't like how little was being done to get Eraserhead and Green Cherub out of the collapsed building. People were taking their time and not worrying because many people thought they were dead, but even then they don't know, so they should be digging them out to save them if they are alive. He wanted to yell at people to get off their asses and start working, but that would probably get him kicked off the scene. Then he would be even less help. He was scared that they were dead because then he would have to tell Hisashi. He was also scared because they hadn't figured out Green Cherub's identity, so who were they supposed to give the death notification to? He hated that he even had to think about this. He was trying to think positively, but watching that building come down didn't leave much hope. On top of that, when the second rumble went through and more collapsed, how could they have survived it? He was going to have to find out Green Cherub's identity from his corpse. He was going to find two great people dead crouched under a building. Naomasa respected Eraserhead a great deal. The man has been patrolling the red light district alone for years and has never complained, while other pros avoid this part because there isn't enough recognition from people. Eraserhead stalked by this district since his rookie days. Because of this, Naomasa and Eraserhead had become good friends, both being on the dead shift and area. Naomasa had met Eraserhead family. He had become friends with them. He was known as Uncle Naomasa by Hitoshi. He would have to deliver the news of Eraserhead death to them. He hated his job. Naomasa also had respect for Green Cherub. This kid had trained themselves to fight and other things just so he could come out and protect the red light district. The kid had more guts than mob heroes and police officers. Green Cherub was a hero in the police and red light district's eyes. The public actually did a lot to make sure he wasn't caught. Naomasa needed to do something. But what? How does he get people moving? Nezu, the rat, owed him a favor since Naomasa had been letting him in the system without raising the alarm or stopping him. He didn't think he was stopping him, but he was helping Nezu by not stopping him. He called the rat. After some explaining, he heard an evil laugh from the other side of the phone. The line went silent. Naomasa was scared. What did he just start? He looked around for something magical and then he saw it. The guy in charge of the rescue picked up his phone, paled, then ran to the middle of the rescue group. We need to get the two people in the rubble out. Let's start moving rocks out of here double time. That rat. Izuku. Izuku was scared. The problem was he didn't know what was scaring him. He wasn't afraid to die, so what was scaring him? He didn't think he would figure it out. If this is it, should I tell Aizawa who I am? Should I tell him it's me? Izuku was thinking about it. He would like to go to the grave having being honest with at least one person or being real with one person. He wanted to make up with Eraserhead if they were to die together. Honestly, Izuku hated the idea of Aizawa knowing it was him under the mask. He had lied so much and pretended so much. What if he thought Izuku was only friends with Hitoshi to get closer to Aizawa? What if he thought Izuku was a villain? As much as he wanted to be honest, he didn't want to be seen as a villain. Izuku looked up at Eraserhead. Eraserhead looked like he was taking a nap. What a lucky bastard. GC. Izuku wasn't actually planning to. After being homeless, he found he couldn't sleep around other people. Even if that wasn't a part of it, he didn't think he could sleep with his anxious mind. Eraserhead coughed a few times. The dust, as much as it had settled, was still finding its way into lungs. Izuku was safe since he had a mask on, but Eraserhead wasn't wearing a mask. Izuku felt his pockets looking for anything that could be used as a mask. The only thing he found was gauze. He held it up to Eraserhead in a question. Izuku shrugged and put the gauze away. Something had been bothering him. Aizawa was acting as if a building collapsing on them was normal and was acting nonchalant. GC, he decided to ask. GC. After a bit of silence, Eraserhead lifted his hands. Izuku thought about it for a bit. He knew he was scared, but he wasn't sure of what. GC. Eraserhead gave him a look. Izuku laughed. There was an awkward moment, then Izuku, deciding he honestly didn't care anymore if Eraserhead figured it out or not, he started being more open. Izuku didn't have to think about it much before answering. GC. They sat there thinking. The dust around them started to stir again. They could feel vibration in the ground. They could hear the sound of things shifting. They were going to be crushed. Izuku looked at Aizawa, who immediately made eye contact with him. Aizawa held his hand out as a welcome. Before Izuku accepted, he had to tell Aizawa the truth. He lifted his hands. Eraserhead. I have to tell you. His signing was interrupted by Aizawa pointing to a little ray of light coming through a crack in the rubble above them. Izuku looked at it too, but it disappeared. Aizawa turned the flashlight off. There, light was shining through the cracks of their tomb. Now that they were actively listening, they could hear voices. Aizawa and Izuku looked at each other, then Aizawa started yelling. We are here. We are alive. We are here. They could hear the noise grow and quicken. Relief filled Izuku. He realized that maybe he wasn't ready to die as he thought he was. Chapter 30, Escape. Summary. Aftermath with Izuku. Notes. I meant to put this chapter out tomorrow, but then got sidetracked, faced with tears of joy. Chapter text. When a flashlight shined on their faces, Izuku almost thought about crying. Eraserhead was pulled out first, then Izuku. Izuku's legs ached badly. So did most of his body, but his legs most from being crammed in such a small space for so long. He was happy it was night, otherwise his concussion would hurt a lot more. He has had way too many concussions now that he thought about it. Thinking hurt. The people who helped them out were letting them get their walking legs back. Izuku looked back into the hole they had been in. He had survived. When he looked around him, a sudden fear hit him. Police everywhere. Multiple heroes. But most of all Hasashi and Hitoshi. They were running up the rubble pile to get to Aizawa. They were probably told about what was going on and came in. Izuku stepped away to make room for the Hasashi and Hitoshi. What if they recognized him? Izuku looked down trying to hide his face, but then realized that something Izuku would do, so he made himself taller and acted more confident. Hasashi and Hitoshi made it to the top of the pile. They hugged Eraserhead. Aizawa hugged back. Izuku smiled under his mask. He was happy Aizawa lived. Suddenly Izuku's arms were pulled behind him and cuffs were put on. He was directed down the rubble. Aizawa had promised he wouldn't get arrested. Correction, Aizawa said that he himself would not arrest Izuku. Sneaky bastard. Once at the bottom of the pile, he looked up at the happy family hugging halfway up the rubble pile. He turned away and followed the police officer in front of him, who led him to a chair and table. If Izuku wasn't up against 20 cops and 5 heroes, rescue or not, he would have run or fought, but it was pointless. Why were they seating him at this table? Why not just bring him to the station? It became clear when an EMT came up to him. They legally had to let him have a checkup at the scene before he could leave. And by the look into all the cop cars, they were all full with either villains or victims. As Izuku was being checked up, a woman he recognized as one of the people being trafficked came up to him. She was older teens, probably 19 or near there. Izuku made himself less threatening looking by making himself smaller and by not fighting the EMT anymore. After a bit of watching Izuku, the woman made a decision and asked, "Why are you in cuffs? Are you not a hero?" Izuku hadn't talked to anyone for a bit. When patrolling with Aizawa, he didn't talk to victims, but when patrolling alone, he did. He just hadn't patrolled on his own in a bit. He would have to talk, but he would only talk to the people being trafficked. "I am a vigilante." "Oh, well, you are still a hero to us. You saved our lives and now we can go home. Thank you so much." "There is no need to thank me. I didn't do anything. Eraserhead is the one who got you guys to safety." He pointed at Eraserhead so she knew his name. "If you hadn't been there fighting them so they weren't paying attention to us, we wouldn't have escaped, so again, thank you." Izuku gave up fighting her on it. "If you're illegal, then why was Eraserhead working with you?" "Honestly, I have no idea. He kinda just showed up one day and started following me around." If Izuku wasn't in cuffs, he would shrug more. This got the reaction Izuku wanted. The woman smiled. The EMT finished the exam. The hero Midnight walked over and guarded Izuku. They probably picked Midnight to guard him because she could incapacitate him with her quirk if needed. Midnight smiled at the woman. "What's your name, sweetie?" Midnight asked her. 6 Agmi. It sounded like she was going to say a number. Izuku should have punched those villains harder. "That is a beautiful name." Agmi smiled at the compliment. Izuku noticed there was a hole in Agmi's shirt. Wasn't too big, but it was noticeable. He decided helping Agmi was more important than keeping his silence in front of a hero. "Sorry, Agmi, that I didn't ask your name earlier. If you want to fix the hole in your shirt, I have a sewing kit in my pocket." "Midnight, would you mind grabbing it? It's on my right side mid-thigh pocket." Izuku was wearing cargo pants, so it had a good amount of pockets. He moved so it was easy access. Midnight grabbed it and then held it out to Agmi. Agmi's face made Izuku think he made a mistake, but then Agmi took the sewing kit. Looking at Izuku, she said, "They never let us fix our clothes because they said it was a sneak peek into what someone was getting." Agmi was crying. "I don't even know how to sew. I can help you if you are okay with me touching your shirt," Midnight said. Izuku was happy Midnight was making sure to not touch Agmi without permission. Agmi nodded, handing the kit back to Midnight. Midnight grabbed another chair from the table. Sitting down, she had Agmi come closer. She handed Agmi a flashlight to hold so she could see the shirt better. "Before I start sewing this up, I want to clear this with you. I won't touch you. I will only touch your shirt, nothing else. I will not take it or rip it from you. I will not hurt you. Are you still okay with me fixing the shirt? Please fix it." At that, Midnight started fixing the shirt. It wasn't as neat as Izuku's stitches, but it wasn't bad. The stitches only needed to last her to the station or hospital where Agmi would get new clothes, so it didn't matter too much. When Midnight was done, Agmi looked at the fixed shirt. She hugged Midnight and went to hug Izuku, but with Izuku's involuntary flinch, Agmi stopped her movement and nodded at Izuku instead. "They are bringing us to the hospital in a second, so I have to go." "What is your name, Vigilante? Is there any way I can see you again?" Izuku thought about it, then answered, "My vigilante name is Green Cherub. I am sorry, but I don't think we will be seeing each other again. I wish you luck in the world, Agmi." Agmi nodded, then left to the car that would be bringing her to the hospital. Izuku curled up as much as he could on his chair. It was a foldable one off to the side. Midnight was still guarding him. He didn't understand why they didn't just bring him to the station and finish the arrest. After a while of silence, Midnight said, "That was a good idea to sew up her shirt." Izuku didn't answer. The victim was gone. Silent treatment. To no answer. "Fine, I can do silent treatment. I know you probably are not going to answer, but I wanted to say it now. I heard how you saved Eraserhead a few months ago and I wanted to thank you. I also wanted to thank you for all that you are doing here in the Red Light District. I patrol nights on the far side sometimes, and you have brought new hope to this area. People are being nicer and caring more about their fellow human. Thank you. I don't agree with arresting you. You aren't hurting anyone that doesn't deserve it. You are helping people, but they are still going to take you off the street," Midnight said after a moment of silence. Eraserhead seemed to finally notice Izuku was missing, or finally realized Izuku was still on the scene and hadn't run off. Aizawa came over to where Izuku and Midnight were sitting. "Why is he in cuffs?" Aizawa asked Midnight. "I didn't put them on him. The police are arresting him. They told me to guard him until the scene is cleared so we can go home. They can't arrest him. I am going to talk to them." "Hang in there, Cherub." Aizawa stormed off. Izuku watched him storm off. Maybe he was wrong and Aizawa really wasn't trying to get him arrested this whole time. He watched as Hisashi intercepted him, stopping Aizawa and talking. Aizawa gestured to Izuku, which made Hisashi look at Cherub. Izuku tried not to shrink. When Aizawa and Hisashi were done talking, Aizawa continued his path. Hisashi, on the other hand, started walking over to Cherub. Fuck, 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 fuck. Why was it his luck that Hisashi and now Hitoshi would not only be on the scene but now be headed his way? He hated his luck. Izuku tried to do the opposite of what Izuku would do and again puffed himself up to look bigger and not as tired as he was. He needed to be confident, but not so confident he talked cause Hisashi has heard his voice. He could try to change his voice and talk deeper. Does he know any accents? He had to stop thinking cause Hisashi was there now. "It's nice to finally meet you, Green Cherub. My name is Yamada Hisashi." Hisashi held his hand out for a handshake, but when Izuku just looked at it, Hisashi realized Izuku was in cuffs. Hisashi awkwardly smiled. Midnight laughed and Hitoshi snorted. "Right. Well, anyways, if you remember, a few months ago we talked on the phone while you were saving my husband's life. I am sorry that this is how we meet face to mask. I would have rather met you while you were free. By the way, Hisashi, he doesn't talk. Yeah, Aizawa told me. Actually, sorry, I lied. He talks to people who aren't heroes or cops, or those related to either, since he isn't talking to you." "What do you mean, Auntie Nem?" Hitoshi asked. Wait. Midnight was Hitoshi's aunt. How? Hitoshi only had two of Izuku's favorite heroes as his dads, but had his next favorite hero as an aunt. Hitoshi was living Izuku's dream. "Well, he talked to one of the people him and Aizawa saved, but won't talk to me or you guys." "Well, I wasn't really expecting him to. I was expecting him to be able to use sign language, but he is cuffed, so that isn't a choice." "Sorry, kiddo." Hisashi chuckled. "Hey Toshi, I am going to see if I can get the cuffs removed since Green Cherub isn't running. Stay here with Nem," Hisashi said, then walked away. "Hey Toshi, haven't seen my favorite nephew in a bit." Midnight said this as she messed up Toshi's hair. "Yeah, we haven't seen each other for a while, not since. Speaking of, how is that kid? I forgot his name. Did you dads ever catch him?" "Izuku. No, they haven't. I don't know if I want them to find him. I miss him and I am worried, but I am still mad." Izuku tried to cover his flinch at his name but didn't do a great job. "It's okay to be mad and it's understandable to have mixed feelings about it. From what I understand, your dad is getting closer to finding him, so I would figure it out soon," Midnight said. "Sorry for talking about personal stuff in front of you." Midnight turned to Izuku while saying this. Izuku decided to shrug. He is actually helping Dad find Izuku. "How, really? Since Cherub spends more time in the red light district than Dad." "Well, that nice of you, Cherub." At that moment, Hisashi came back with the key to the cuffs. "Before I uncuff you, I want you to remember that there are armed police officers and heroes here. This also doesn't come for free. You do have to answer some questions that Detective Naomasa will be asking." Izuku nodded, then stood up and turned around to give Hisashi accessibility to the cuffs. There was a laugh. "You are tiny, kid. The whole time I have been guarding you were sitting so I could get your height, but my god. I knew you were small but wasn't expecting this. How did you fight that villain?" Midnight said all this while laughing. Izuku decided to kick her chair as a shut up. He might have kicked harder than he meant to because the chair went out from under her, making her fall on her butt. "Well, I guess that shows how he fought the villain." Midnight was now laughing the ground. Hisashi and Hitoshi started laughing too. If Izuku didn't feel bad, he would laugh too. Izuku put his hand out for Midnight to grab so he could help her up. She took her hand and Izuku helped her up, then grabbed her chair. "GC, sorry kid, I don't know sign language," Midnight said, then Hitoshi stepped in. He said, "Sorry. It's okay, no need to apologize. I was making fun of your height, so it's only fair. If you think his small stature stops him from taking down villains, you are wrong," Aizawa said as he walked over Naomasa with him. "Yeah, I found that out the hard way," Midnight said with her usual smile. "Sorry to ruin your little group, but me and Eraserhead have a few questions for Cherub, so you guys are going to have to leave. Hisashi and Nem, why don't you go show Hitoshi how clearing a scene goes?" "Cool. Bye, Uncle Naomasa," Hitoshi said. "What the actual fuck? Lucky bastard." Izuku turned to the two men, changing his demeanor to be scary. He wasn't going to answer questions and he didn't want to be here, but Eraserhead would catch him in a second. He decided to show this by sitting down on the pavement. Eraserhead sat down too, but Naomasa groaned, then clambered down. What an old man. Okay, first things first, you know who both of us are, so we can skip introductions. Yeah. We do have a few questions, but the first question I have is, why are you still here? GC, why are you still at this scene? You could have left a while ago. GC, you realize that not one of these cops would try to stop you, right? I am not sure about the heroes, but I don't think any of them would try to stop you either, Naomasa said, causing Izuku surprise. GC, we just arrested you so you would get checked over by an EMT since we know you wouldn't. We also have to follow a protocol. As long as it says we put you in handcuffs, it means we tried. None of the people here want you arrested. We want you to be safe, but you are doing good for the red light district and haven't tried to hurt any of the heroes or police, so you have a lot of respect, Naomasa explained. He is crazy. GC, Aizawa broke his silence. We thought we were being so obvious. Guess we forgot to loop you in. Next time we will. GC, what do you mean you saved me? I saved you, Aizawa said. Izuku rolled his eyes. GC, looks like he saved you, Aizawa, Naomasa said while laughing. I like concussed green cherub, he is a lot less filtered. GC, since we do have you here, I do have a few questions. Would you mind answering them? I would tell you about my quirk, but you aren't answering verbally, so it doesn't matter. GC, okay, I know you won't answer your name, so how old are you? Izuku had to think on that one. It didn't matter if they knew his age, the problem was he wasn't sure how old he was. GC, both men looked at him in shock. June 19th. GC, Naomasa's mouth was hanging open. Aizawa didn't look too surprised. Oh, okay, I'm well with that answer. Do you have a safe home? GC, Izuku thought it was safe. Good. Why are you a vigilante? GC, Izuku was probably answering more honestly than he would have if he didn't have a concussion, but that was a future Izuku problem. Okay, what is your quirk? Naomasa asked. GC, thought I would give it a try. Izuku rolled his eyes. GC, I don't have any more, Naomasa said, then turned to Aizawa in a question. I don't have any, Aizawa said. GC, as he signed this, he got up and ran away. As much as he wanted to trust what Naomasa and Aizawa had said, he was still unsure. No one chased him. Hisashi. He watched as Green Cherub ran from the scene. He was relieved that he escaped and didn't get arrested. When Sho had said Cherub was a kid, Hisashi didn't expect him to actually be a kid. He was just as surprised as Nem when he stood up. No wonder Sho had asked him to make extra bentos for Cherub. He was tiny. He would have to put more food in them. They had come back every few days empty, which both worried Hisashi and made him happy. He was happy Cherub liked the cooking and was eating, but he was worried that Cherub might need the food to survive. Another thing was bothering Hisashi though. Something about Cherub was familiar, but he couldn't pinpoint who it reminded him of and what was ticking this feeling. He went over the interaction with Cherub trying to figure out what he recognized, but there was nothing specific. If anything, as was everything. It was the way he avoided eye contact. It was the way he signed. It was his interaction with Midnight. He just couldn't pinpoint it. It was driving Hisashi crazy. He ran his hand through his hair, which he didn't realize it, but he only did it when something was bothering him. What's up, Pops? Toshi asked. I am trying to figure something out, Hisashi answered, still half lost in thought. What is it? Maybe I can help, Toshi said. Hisashi's heart warmed. Maybe he could help. Something about Green Cherub is familiar, but I can't pinpoint it because it's small, but also because I don't know what it reminds me. Good, I thought it was just me. You were getting a familiar feeling too. Yes, but like you, I can't pinpoint it. Guess I can't help you. They were still on the scene of the collapsed building, waiting to be able to leave when Sho came over and said they could go. Hisashi was still shaking from the call from earlier, but he was trying to hide it. He needed to be strong. He needed to be here for Sho. He drove them home, continuously looking over at his husband to make sure he was really there. He had distracted himself earlier with Green Cherub, but now it was just them and it was getting harder to pretend. When they got home, everybody went to bed. Hisashi and Sho were lying in bed. You're doing okay, Sho? As well as I can. Is there anything I can do? Could you schedule a hound dog appointment for me? Of course, Sho. Do you want to talk about any of it now? It might help. After a moment of silence, Sho started talking. I am not going to lie, I was scared. I was scared I wouldn't see you and Hitoshi again. I was scared for Green Cherub. I was so scared, but I had to hold it together for Cherub. I tried to get him out of the building, but he wouldn't leave. I couldn't get him out and fight the villain at the same time. When the building really started coming down, I covered Cherub's body with mine. According to Cherub, I passed out and he ended up saving me when the second part of the building fell. He dragged me to a more stable position. He got hurt doing that. Sho was quiet. Hisashi wrapped his arms around Sho. What happened isn't your fault. I am happy you were not alone in there and had someone to save you. Cherub made his choice. Do you think there will be any new triggers from this? I honestly don't know. Are you okay? I am okay. I won't lie, I was really scared when I got the call and on scene, but once you got out of there I was okay. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. "Come in," Sho said. Hitoshi came into the room sheepishly, then went up to their bed before climbing and laying between Hisashi and Sho. "You okay, Toshi?" Hisashi asked. There wasn't a real answer, but the sniffling answered the question. Hisashi forgot how scary it must be for Hitoshi. Hisashi was almost used to the calls and knew they were likely being a hero and all, but Hitoshi was still a kid. He had just heard his dad might have been crushed by a collapsed building. Hisashi regretted taking him onto the scene, but he couldn't leave Hitoshi here alone, and he didn't have anyone to take care of Hitoshi. Hisashi and Sho hugged their son. They all fell asleep like this. Chapter 31. Christmas Tree Santa Claus Christmas Extra Santa Claus Christmas Tree. Summary. Izuku's Christmas. Notes. Chapter text. Izuku had decided he hated Christmas. He started thinking that at the age of 6, when because of him being quirkless he only got gifts from his mom and the Bakugos. It got worse at the age of 8 when he realized his mother hadn't gotten anything for him. It was the last time he got anything for Christmas, or the last time anyone cared about him on Christmas. He hated that everyone else was happy with their families while he was alone. He hated that he didn't have anyone. He stopped celebrating when he was 10. Now he just went on like it was a normal day, but seeing all the Christmas stuff up everywhere have him a sour taste in his mouth. This year was not very different. It was Christmas Eve and he was alone. Aizawa was not there that night, instead he was with his family. Izuku decided to go on patrol since he didn't have anything to do. He was incredibly bored. Apparently criminals all had an unspoken rule not to be a criminal on Christmas. Izuku would be happy, but he was angry and needed to get it out. So he did what he always did. He started running across roofs. He almost tripped on something sparkling. He stopped and looked to see what it was. He looked down. It was a box smaller than a shoebox wrapped in colorful paper and a green ribbon on it. There was a tag that read, "To Green Cherub, from the Itos." Izuku read over the tag a few times. A gift for him. He looked around to make sure it wasn't a trick. He took out his bow stick, poking the box. Nothing happened, so he decided it was safe. He dropped into his crouch. He carefully started unwrapping the present. Opening it, a sweet smell hit him. He looked in to see a card and a paper plate with cookies. He opened the card. "Dear Green Cherub, me and my family owe you so much. You saved me and my son from being mugged. I was scared for my life, but more scared for my young son. You showed up and saved us. Every day I am thankful you were there. My son just graduated middle school because of you. It isn't much, but here are some cookies. I hope you aren't working on Christmas Eve or Christmas. Me and the rest of the Red Light District thank you for your work and service. We love you. Thank you, Mrs. Ito." In the card was a picture of a woman and a young boy. Izuku did recognize them, but couldn't remember exactly what their situation was. He tried one of the cookies. They were delicious. He ended up eating all 5. He put the card and picture in his pocket. He would keep them to remind him why he did this. Once ready to go, he started running again. He wasn't expecting what he found. Every now and then he would find a present on a rooftop. What was in the box differed. Sometimes it was food, others it was gear like bandages. But something almost every single one had in common was they had a card and a picture of whoever he had saved. "Dear Green Cherub, I cannot thank you enough. A month ago you saved my wife from being taken advantage of. She was coming home from work when 2 men cornered her. You swooped in and saved her. Not only that, but you sewed up her ripped clothes and waited with her until police were there. I am so thankful that you were there to save her. No one deserves what she went through. You helped her get through it. The entirety of the Red Light District, and I thank you for all that you have done. Thank you, Mr. Abe." A picture of a couple in their mid-30s was included. "Dear Green Cherub, you saved me from being trafficked. I had been in the system for a bit. I was losing hope that I would ever be free, but then when being sold you broke up the transaction and saved me. You talked me through what would happen when the police showed up. You fixed my clothes, which was a kindness that I was not expecting. You talked me down from a panic attack. I have since been living as normal a life as I can. I have a job and am in a happy relationship with a girl I think I might ask to marry me. Every single day when I feel hopeless and like I am failing, I think of you. You continue to save my life even months later. Knowing you are out there watching over us makes me and the rest of the Red Light District feel safer. Thank you so much. I don't think I can ever stop thanking you. Thank you, Mr. Kato." Included was a travel sewing kit and a picture of a man in his late 20s smiling brightly at the camera. "Dear Green Cherub, you saved my life. I was an idiot. I was robbing people. It thought it made me bigger and cooler, but I also needed the money. I was mugging a woman when you showed up and showed me how wrong I was. You stopping me caused me to go to prison where I learned my lesson. You stopped me from becoming a worse human. I worked my butt off in prison to earn money so when I got out I wouldn't make the same mistakes. I now am living a very legal lifestyle. I try to help those in need when I can. You turned my life around and made me see where I was headed if I continued doing what I was doing. Thank you, Mr. Akagi." Inside was a picture of a man in his 40s. In the box was a pair of handcuffs. "Dear Green Cherub, you saved me from a robbery. While shopping in a store, an armed man came in and started threatening the cashier with a gun. When the cashier didn't listen, the robber grabbed the closest person, which happened to be me. He held me at gunpoint, saying he would shoot me if the cashier didn't give up all money. The cashier wasn't moving fast enough for the robber, so the robber shot me in the back. The bullet, while ripping some organs, punctured my lung. You showed up and took out the robber, then did first aid. That saved my life. I finally got out of the hospital a few days ago. If it was tea for you, 8 would have died in that store. If it was tea for you, my kids would be motherless. On behalf of the whole of the red light district, I thank you for the protection you supply. Thank you, Mrs. Baba. Inside was a picture of an older woman in a hospital bed surrounded by what Izuku guessed was family. In the box was a bunch of first aid equipment. Izuku kept every single one of the 34 cards and pictures given to him. He put them in a big plastic bag so they wouldn't be ruined. He kept all the equipment he was given and the food. Izuku would be lying if he said he didn't tear up at the letters. He wasn't expecting anything to be different. He realized he did have a family. It was the red light district. He loved hearing his family was safe and getting better. He didn't realize how much he needed the cards. Izuku maybe didn't hate Christmas. Chapter 32, Night Terrors. Summary: Izuku isn't doing so hot. TW. Blood. Thor. Death. Depression. Notes. Chapter text. Izuku had been having nightmares. Well, he has been having nightmares since the group home, but they have been getting worse. They were really bad after the stabbing and then calmed down, but now they were right back up there. He hadn't been sleeping because these ones were scarier, since he was waking up in the middle of nowhere every time. He missed his apartment where he felt fully safe. He had been awake for 2 days now. He was exhausted so much so it was affecting his vigilante work, since he slept every few days. Aizawa was noticing. He would have to sleep tonight. After his patrol, he cuddled up into his sleeping bag trying to sleep. It took forever, but soon he fell asleep. Izuku's dream. Izuku was running across rooftops in his uniform. He heard a rumble, then a crash. He stopped in his tracks, then looked around. He could just see the dust cloud coming up from a collapsed building. Izuku ran towards it, but a dark feeling hit his gut. He got there only to see a gray scarf poking out from the rubble pile. Izuku ran forward, moving the rubble till he got to the mangled and broken body of Aizawa. His blood covered the rocks. His head caved in. His limbs not right. He was going to throw up. Izuku awake. Izuku jolted up, rolling to the side, vomiting on the roof. His eyes were filled with tears. He got up, pacing the roof, trying to calm down. He kept repeating, "It was just a dream." He couldn't shake the feeling. He pulled out the Cherub phone and went to Aizawa's contact. He paused. What does he say without letting Aizawa know he had a nightmare? He didn't want Aizawa seeing him as weak. Sighing, he turned his phone off, putting it back in his bag. He looked at his sleeping spot. He had thrown up right next to where he was sleeping. He packed his stuff up and left, looking for a new spot. He didn't think he would be sleeping anymore that night. The 2 hours of sleep he did get was enough. His reaction time was slower. Villains were getting the drop on him, and it was showing. The amount of bruises on Izuku was amazing. Not only was his reaction time getting worse, but he couldn't think straight. He was in a fog. His immune system was down. He had a nasty cold that was making everything worse. He was overly irritated and sad. Because he wasn't able to be as vigilant, he was very jumpy. Aizawa had been able to sneak up on him 5 times in the last 3 nights. Usually Izuku had a sixth sense for Aizawa. He knew Aizawa had noticed because Aizawa had changed his behavior. He was being more gentle with Izuku. He was stepping into fights earlier and was honestly kinda keeping Izuku on the sidelines. One night while they had stopped for a snack, Aizawa asked, "What's up with you, kid? You are getting sloppy and seem out of it." GC, Izuku lied. He couldn't have. Aizawa thinking he was weak. "If you are so busy, why come out on patrol?" GC, he was being too honest, but he was too tired to care. That left them in silence for the rest of the break. Aizawa didn't bring it up again. He decided to sleep in a well-lit area so it wasn't so scary when he woke up. He did his usual bed routine, then tried to fall asleep. He was so tired it didn't take long. Izuku's dream. He was in the raid again, going through the building. He had taken down the 2 guards in the 3rd floor and was now on the stairwell outside the main room. He ran in and started fighting. He saw Aizawa run in too. Izuku, while fighting, surveyed the room. He saw the victims of the traffickers. Izuku started fighting harder. He needed to save them. He looked over to Aizawa to see him pinned to the wall by 2 villains while another was coming towards him with a knife. Izuku bolted for Aizawa but was too late as the villain drove the knife into Aizawa's heart. Izuku watched as the life left Aizawa's eyes. His body slumped, causing the 2 villains to drop the hero's body. His body hit the floor like a rag doll. No more life in it. Izuku was frozen. This was his mistake because the villains overwhelmed him. They threw him to the ground and started beating him. He didn't care. He couldn't look away from Aizawa's lifeless eyes. All of a sudden he heard a battle cry. Izuku looked at the source to see a woman he recognized as Akemi running towards the villains. How did he know her name? She was yelling for them to get of him. One of the men grabbed her by the hair and slit her throat. Rage filled Izuku. He tried to fight back but couldn't handle the amount of villains. One pulled out a knife then drove it into Izuku's stomach. Awake Izuku. Izuku jolted awake, ripping off his shirt to access the damage. There was no blood. Why was there no blood? There was pain but no blood. What about Aizawa and Akemi? Izuku looked around but then it became clear. He had another nightmare. Looking down at his torso he realized where the villain had stabbed him in his dream was the same place Tatsuki had stabbed him. The phantom pain didn't stop. He was tired, very tired, but he was scared to sleep. He couldn't handle another nightmare. He was going to go insane. Izuku decided to do some everyday things to try to get some normality. Even though he was no longer living at his apartment, he still checked his PO box every now and then in case he got important mail. He might not be living in an apartment or have a job right now, but if he wanted one in the future, he needed to make sure everything was all set on paper. He didn't go to the post office until later, almost closing time. There was only one letter in his box. Grabbing it, he decided to get back to his sleeping spot to open it. He had a few more errands to run though, so it wouldn't be for a while. Izuku sat down on his little makeshift bed. It was 7 p.m. He pulled out the letter from his pocket. He hadn't read who the letter was from until then. It was a letter from Mr. Watanabe. What could this be about? He looked at the date it had been sent. It was sent 2 weeks ago. He opened the letter, pulling it out. It was a printed message. He started reading. Dear Izuku Sasaki, no one was going to tell you, but I felt you had a right to know. I regret to inform you that your former mother Inko Midoriya has passed away. Her funeral has already taken place. I did not find out until a week after her death, and I am not sure when you will read this letter. She died in a car accident while drunk driving. She killed the other driver. I am sorry to have to give you this news. I feel it was needed to tell you because she had not changed her will yet and you still have a claim to her home and anything else left. I am only sending this message. I will not be helping you get the will. I hope life is not too hard on you. My condolences. Watanabe. Izuku didn't know how to feel. He didn't know if he could feel. Everything was foggy. Why was he sad? She hadn't been there since he was 7. She disowned him. Why was he sad? He should be happy. But he wasn't. He kept reading over the letter. She is dead. Inko was dead. She killed someone. Was this his fault? Was he so much of a burden on her that she was an alcoholic? Izuku looked in the envelope to see if there was anything else. There was a business card of an attorney. Izuku didn't know what to do. He didn't know where to go. He did the only thing that he knew how to do. He got into his patrol gear. He started running across the rooftops. He didn't know where he was running, he was just running. He hoped that if he ran fast enough he would forget it all. Inko had not acted like a real mother since Izuku was 7, so why did he care she was dead? It had been almost 7 years since she acted like a mother. He missed her funeral. He couldn't explain it, but this stopped him on the roof he was on. He sat down on the edge. He didn't know where he was. He should, but he couldn't think enough to recognize anything. He sat there looking at the city lights. The wind caused a comforting chill. Everything was foggy. Hey kid, you should probably get away from the edge. He recognized the voice, but he didn't know from where. Cherub, I am being serious. Get away from the edge. I know you are agile, but that is dangerous even for you. It was Eraserhead. Izuku got up and moved farther away from the edge. Still kinda close, but that's better. Izuku heard Aizawa sit down next to him. Where have you been, kid? We were supposed to meet up at 8. It's 2 a.m. Why didn't you meet up? It was 2. How long had he been running? How long had he been sitting there? By the ache in his legs it seemed he had been running for a very long time. Izuku didn't move. He couldn't. Hey Cherub, you okay? Izuku could do nothing but shrug half-heartedly. He couldn't move his hands. What is wrong? In a small voice Izuku answered. He didn't have the strength to sign, so he spoke. She is dead. Who? My mom. He barely whispered this. Aizawa didn't move. They sat them in silence until Aizawa said, Why are you out here then? It's the only thing I could think of. Are you going to take time off patrol to mourn? No, why not? She wasn't in my life much. I haven't even called her mom since I was 9. I am not sure why I am feeling the way I am. Kid, she was still your mom for a bit by the sound of it. She did give birth to you. If she didn't take care of you, who did? I did. There was silence. Izuku hadn't looked at Aizawa once. He didn't care to see his reaction. Where is your dad? Not sure. What do you mean? He left when I was 6, and she never told me where he went. He had almost said Inko. So currently you don't have an adult looking after you? I haven't for a few years. Kid, you said you were living in a safe environment. It is safer than living with my mom. Izuku said truthfully. Inko was never physically abusive, but she wasn't very nice either. Where are you living? Izuku didn't answer. He didn't have a lie and he didn't want to tell the truth. Kid, you have to tell me. I don't. Izuku started to get up, but Aizawa put a hand on his shoulder, holding him there. Let me go. I can't just let you leave. You are going to let me leave. I am not letting you leave. Izuku turned to Aizawa, glaring at him. He would not be held here to answer questions. He would not be forced to stay. Eraserhead, I swear you want to let me go. We both know you won't hurt me. You might be right, but if you don't let me go, I will never let you come near me again. Izuku wasn't lying. Aizawa must have seen this because he removed his hand from Izuku's shoulder and moved to the side. Izuku ran. He was slow this time because of the ache in his legs. He didn't return to his spot. Instead, he went to a random park. He climbed a tree sitting in the branches. This is where he stayed for the night. He didn't sleep. Aizawa. The more he knew about Cherub, the more he was worried. First, he finds out that the kid doesn't have anyone to worry about him. Then he finds out how the kid really is. Then the fact patrolling might be the only thing keeping him alive, and now the fact he has been on his own since he was pretty young. No wonder Cherub was the way he was. What was also worrying Aizawa was how sluggish Cherub has been. He could see how tired Cherub was, and it seemed to have started after the whole collapsing building thing. He would have believed Cherub's crammed school excuse if it wasn't for the timeline of everything. By looks and sound of it, Cherub has had trouble sleeping and has had no one taking care of him or helping him through it. Aizawa knew he was lucky that he had Hisashi who understood the nightmares. He knew he was privileged to be able to go to therapy. From the signs of everything he had seen, Cherub has PTSD from the building collapsing. How can he help someone he doesn't know? Tonight was the most he had learned of the kid's personal life. What Aizawa knew was about patrolling. He would ask Hisashi about it. Hisashi was better at this stuff. Aizawa was thinking about what had happened tonight on his way home. The kid didn't have a dad nor mom. He was going to adopt Cherub if he could. He got to his front door walking and he headed for his room. Hisashi, like usual, was still up. He saw that his hearing aid wasn't in. Hey, how is patrol? Hey, what's wrong with Cherub? Hey, poor Cherub. Do you have any ideas of how to help him? Hey, what are you calling helping? Aizawa sighed. He realized that same thing is what got us in this same mess with Izu. Hisashi stopped suddenly, a surprised look on his face. Then Hisashi looked back at Aizawa. Aizawa was too tired to connect whatever dots Hisashi had just connected. When I met Cherub face to face, something felt familiar about him, but I couldn't figure out what, and I couldn't figure out what it was familiar to. When you were talking about what he said to you when you grabbed his shoulder, it brought me back to Izuku. Thinking about Izuku's voice, I realized that when we were trying to get him to stay wasn't the first time I had heard his voice. I had heard it the night Green Cherub called me on your phone about your stabbing. Please tell me I am not crazy for thinking Izuku is Green Cherub. Aizawa was shocked. Hisashi was right. Aizawa thought back to his and Cherub's interactions, then to his and Izuku's. It made sense the more he thought about it. A while ago, when he suspected Izuku was Cherub, he wrote it off since he didn't have as much proof as he did now, but now he had the proof. What do we do if we both agree on this? If he was Cherub the whole time, that means he knew who you were when we met with him and Hitoshi. No wonder he was so nervous. How are they the same person? It isn't making sense in my mind. One was so sweet and wouldn't hurt a fly, while Cherub literally bashes people's heads into walls. When you saw Izuku, or was Cherub? You said he was patrolling and met up with you a bit later. With it, they went to bed. Aizawa wasn't sure how he wasn't going to act differently with Cherub, but he had to act normal. Cherub had been opting out of patrol for the last few days. Aizawa hoped it was to get the mother thing sorted out. Aizawa was tired. He was trying to balance being a hero, a father, a husband, and a teacher all at the same time, while also taking care of Cherub. He wouldn't take back anything, though. He loved his husband and family. He loved being a hero and helping people. He loved being able to help shape the future heroes. He was really happy to have met Cherub. Aizawa did, on the other hand, wish he had a break sometimes. It felt like everything went wrong at the same time and was constantly busy. He wished he could take a moment for himself to breathe and do something he really wanted to do. Aizawa would be lying if he said he didn't miss Cherub on patrol, but right now Cherub was busy. He couldn't wait for him to come back. It had been a week since Cherub returned to patrolling. Cherub hadn't changed much, maybe a little more reserved. Aizawa was really worried one night because something he never thought would happen happened. Aizawa and Cherub had stopped on a roof to take a break. Aizawa was covering even more than usual for Cherub. The kid was obviously exhausted. They had been sitting in silence. Aizawa finished his juice packet, turning to Cherub to see Cherub's eyes were closed and his head was resting on his knees. Cherub had fallen asleep. This kid. Aizawa knew how tired the kid was, so he didn't wake him. Instead, he let him sleep. He watched over him, making sure he was safe. After a while, he went on his phone. He took a picture of the sleeping vigilante, then sent it to Naomasa. The kid was honestly adorable. Cherub was literally curled up in a ball head on his knees, fast asleep. He was pretty sure he could hear slight snoring. Aizawa watched over him. He didn't care that his legs hurt from sitting on concrete for 2 hours. The sun was up when Cherub finally woke up. Cherub looked around, then asked, "GC, you fell asleep?" "GC, about 5 hours. I didn't wake you up because you have been insanely tired. It's affecting your patrolling." Cherub looked at Aizawa in absolute shock. Aizawa hid his smile in his scarf. They sat there in silence, watching the sun come up. Before the sun was fully up, they parted ways heading home. When Aizawa got home, he was hit with a bunch of questions. Aizawa realized he had completely forgotten to tell Hisashi he was staying with Cherub. He showed Hisashi the picture of Cherub. Hisashi forgave him. Chapter 33, Education. Summary. Izuku gets smarter. Notes. Chapter text. Chapter 29. Izuku decided he could never talk to Eraserhead again. He fell asleep 5 feet from him. Eraserhead was gonna use this as blackmail. Izuku was dreading seeing him tomorrow. Izuku didn't understand why Eraserhead didn't wake him up. He hated Eraserhead. If there was one thing Izuku regretted, it was dropping out of school. He liked learning, he just didn't like the people at school with him. Izuku was trying to find a way to get the last few years of education he missed. Looking for a job opened his eyes to how much an education helps, mostly since Izuku is quirkless. For some reason, most people, when they see a quirkless person who dropped out of middle school, they assume they are dumb. So since he had been turned down almost everywhere, he decided to try to finish his education. It would also give him more to do. There are no cheap enough schools that would take him. Izuku had no idea what to do. Maybe he could ask Eraserhead. No, Izuku already owed him too much. The only thing he hadn't looked at was online school. Izuku didn't have internet or data most of the time, nor anywhere to charge his phone. It was an honest miracle his phone still worked. Not only that, but the online schools required a laptop or other computer to work. He did not have the money for that. He barely had money for food and other necessities. That is why he needed the job, but every manager said, "You don't have enough of an education. I can't hire someone who barely started 6th grade. Izuku knew the real reason was because he was quirkless, but it would be discrimination to turn him away for that reason. Izuku decided to keep looking for jobs. Someone had to let him work. It hit him one day while out and about buying some canned goods. He was walking by a library in the rich area of town when he saw an advertisement for online school. The library hosted it. The online school was for those who didn't have enough money to go in person. The library would let people use their computers. It wasn't completely free. You did have to keep a certifiably grade average, and you did have to pay the 200 yen for an hour on the computer. Also, you had to get a library card. Izuku was fine with this. It was the best he was going to get. He walked into the library, going up to the front desk. No one was there, so he decided to look around. It was a pretty big place. There were 2 floors. Each floor had at least 2 comfy corners. There were both desktop computers and laptops that you had to ask a librarian for. There were even little quiet study rooms. Izuku's favorite part of the library was the kid room. There was a coloring station, a play section, and a lot of beanbags and comfy chairs. Once Izuku decided he liked the library, he went back to the front desk and waited a minute or two until the librarian came back. "How may I help you?" Izuku realized he would have to speak. Maybe he could avoid it. He experimentally tried to sign. "I am sorry, kiddo, I don't know sign language, but here is some pen and paper. Can you hear?" Izuku nodded, then took the pen and paper. He wrote he couldn't speak, then inquired about the online school. "Okay, hun, I got you. Follow me. The computers are this way. I can get you set up to start today." Izuku followed her to the computers. "Okay, this will take a while. Once you are set up with a library card, then we can get you enrolled into school. I am going to lead you through this. All I need you to do is follow my directions. By the way, my name is Tanaka Aki. I am the head librarian here." Izuku and Mrs. Tanaka spent the next 2.5 hours working through paperwork. Izuku was exhausted after this, but tried not to act it. "Okay, Mr. Sasaki, you are all set. The library is open for another 2 hours, so feel free to start your lesson. I will let you know that they will test you in each subject to see where you are grades-wise so they can help you. There is a really nice cafe next door if you want coffee or anything. We do allow food and drink in here, but if you make a mess, you won't be allowed to bring it in. If you need anything, I will be around." Izuku went to correct her about his name, but she was already gone before he could. He decided to get some food and drink, then start the test to see where he was. Sitting at his desktop computer with his tea, he put the computer's headphones on, signed in, and started the first test. There was an individual test for each subject taught in school: maths, social studies, science, and language arts. Each test took about 20 minutes, so he would be cut it pretty close to closing time. He didn't see his results before having to sign out and leave the library. Izuku couldn't believe it. One minute he didn't have any hope for school, the next he was enrolled. What Izuku found insane was the fact the school was pretty much free. He decided to look up who was sponsoring the school because there were real employees and professors running the school, so it had to cost some money. Izuku sat in a cafe looking up and was surprised to see he recognized one of the sponsors. Nezu. Aizawa had told him about Nezu, but Izuku didn't know the guy was rich. Guess that's what happens when you sue a bunch of people and are an evil genius. Nezu was Izuku's role model. Izuku was actually excited for tomorrow. He would be able to see his test grades and restart his education. He just had to make it through his patrol. He had been avoiding Eraserhead after the sleeping thing. He just felt it was awkward. What Izuku didn't like was he was able to fall asleep next to Eraserhead. He didn't sleep well around other people. On the street it was different since the people he slept in front of didn't care about him. They weren't going to blackmail him or anything for sleeping. He didn't trust most people to sleep near them. After what would happen in the group home, he had trouble sleeping deeply at all. When he was asleep, Ritsu would let people into the room then walk out so he wouldn't get in trouble. While Ritsu was gone, the opioids he let in would pull pranks. They would cut his hair, beat him up, or dump ice water on him. When he woke up, they would all run and hide. The caretakers never did anything. Ritsu would say he went to the bathroom so he didn't see the attackers, and the attackers would always be fast asleep during the attack, so Izuku never got justice. Now he couldn't sleep around people. For some reason, being in public like when he was homeless was the only exception. But now Izuku had fallen asleep like that in front of Eraserhead. He was completely asleep, not even somewhat alert. He hated it. He hated that he let his guard down like that. The only thing that was letting him have some hope that everything would be fine was the fact Eraserhead didn't do anything and just sat with Izuku. If anything, Eraserhead protected him while he slept. He would have to face Eraserhead at some point. Izuku went to their usual snack spot after a few hours of patrol. He decided to not seek out Eraserhead but to bump into him. Chapter 34, Reconnection. Summary. Yay, happy family time. Notes. Chapter text. Izuku loved online school. There are no bullies or dress codes. He would go to the library for a while and do a few lessons, then just hang out in the library. He loved the staff there. They were all so nice. He also loved the regulars. He found out that the online was more popular than he thought. There was something like 18 people enrolled. Their ages ranged a lot. He was in the library so much he was on first names with the librarians and Samdok the regulars, something that opened Izuku's eyes to how bad the discrimination towards him was. He saw the original test scores. Turns out he was a bit ahead of 6th grade, which surprised him since he dropped out in the beginning of 6th grade. Not only that, but all his teachers said he was dumb. The grades he was getting online though were 90 seconds and up. He was actually top of the class. Was he smart the whole time? Why did the teachers say he wasn't if he was? Izuku realized this question would never be answered, so it would be best to just move on. He was helping Iki put away books when she said, "We have an open spot here at the library. I was thinking since you are always here and are good with the books and everything, you should start working here. We would hire you. Working here also means you don't have to pay for the computers or library card. What do you think?" Izuku didn't really have to think. Over the past 2 months he had fallen in love with the environment here, so he nodded in shock. Iki had been learning a little sign language with Izuku's help since Izuku has been here, so he said, "L." It took Iki a second to understand, but then she smiled. It wouldn't happen immediately. It would take a week or two and you would have to do a bit of training. I am so excited. Izuku and Iki had been getting closer over the past bit. Iki was like an older sister to him. She had figured out a bit of Izuku's position. She had been letting him stay late at the library and just hang out here. It had become Izuku's safe place when he needed a moment where he wasn't on the street. When he entered the library, it was like a whole different world. Once they finished putting away the books, Iki started the process of trying to get him employed there. Izuku knew being employed somewhere would make it a lot easier for the Yamada Aizawa family to find him, but that was okay. It was worth it. After a week of paperwork, he was officially an employee. Now started his 2 days of training. He already had the library memorized and understood the book system. The only thing he needed help on was the book checkout system. He really wouldn't be allowed to check anyone's books out or in for a month or two, but he would have to learn the system. Izuku loved working here. He now was paid to hang out in his favorite place. He was allowed to do his classes while working if his work was done. He opened a new bank account and was getting paid again, which helped a lot. Izuku was almost tempted to get an apartment, but he didn't want it to be that easy for him to be found. He had told all the librarians to warn him if anyone from the Yamada Aizawa family came in. He even went as far as to show them pictures. He was asked if he was in trouble. He said no, but that he just wanted to be warned. It took 2 weeks of working at the library for Aizawa to come in. Izuku was putting books away on the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor wasn't a full floor, it was more of a balcony. There was a railing NGS so you could see down onto the 1st floor. The 2nd floor was outfitted with study rooms that broke up the shelves of books. It wrapped around the whole library. Izuku was putting books away when he heard a familiar voice that made him turn around. He saw Aizawa talking to Iki at the front desk. Izuku was frozen. He had a feeling this would happen, but he never planned for it happening. He also didn't think it would happen so soon. Aizawa left the front desk and started walking around. Iki looked up at the 2nd floor and shrugged. Izuku sighed. He would have to play it cool. Hopefully Aizawa wouldn't make a beeline for him once he found Izuku. Izuku did switch his job to cleaning the private study rooms, so he was a bit more hidden. It almost worked. He was cleaning the 4th room, wiping down the table, when he saw out of the corner of his eye Aizawa walk by. He almost breathed a sigh of relief, but then Aizawa backtracked. "Hey kid, I didn't know you worked here," Aizawa said while leaning against the door frame of the study room, effectively blocking Izuku's only escape route. Maybe hiding in here wasn't a great idea. Izuku didn't answer, he just kept cleaning. I am not going to hurt you or arrest you. I just want to talk. Izuku shook his head. I want to clear everything up. Me and Hisashi are worried about you. We want to make sure you are safe. Izuku honestly didn't know what to do. What was he supposed to do? This actually sucked. He should have made a better plan. Or made a plan to begin with. I can see you have a job doesn't mean you are living somewhere safe. Shared are you living? Izuku knew Aizawa knew where he was living. This was stupid. Why was Aizawa acting like he hadn't been looking for Izuku? We both know that isn't good enough of an answer. Where are you living? Aizawa said with a bit more finality. After what happened and what I read, I think it is my business. You owe me the full truth after what happened. Guilt tripping. That is mean even for Aizawa. Izuku decided to be mean too. He turned to Aizawa, making eye contact and using the intimidation things living on the street teaches you. We mess up looking into your past without talking to you first. And we shouldn't have cornered you. I only tried real force after you stabbed Hisashi. Aizawa was watching him. Izuku sometimes forgot that Aizawa works with criminals, so he has his own intimidation tactics. No matter, Izuku wasn't scared. He had been through too much and seen too much to be scared. He was also about 75% sure Aizawa wouldn't hurt him too much. Izuku blatantly lied. As much as he hated admitting it, he regretted leaving. I want to have an actual conversation with you. Can we sit down and have one? Without all the intimidation and stuff. Izuku honestly wanted to get this over with. If he got this over with, then he could stop having to stake out his sleeping spot with Aizawa every few nights. He just wanted to stop dreading this conversation. Deal. I can wait. I will be here, so please don't run away. I want to solve this. Is there any way I can have Hisashi and Hitoshi come so we can sort this all out in one go? Aizawa said. Izuku knew he was telling the truth. Izuku thought about it. If Aizawa told the truth, then they could come, but if he lied, then no go. Aizawa had been talking to Cherub about everyone's feeling on the incident, so Izuku did know, but he asked to be realistic. Hisashi knows you had your reasons and is really worried about you. I am not sure about Hitoshi. Ikeo, he was pretty mad in the beginning. He has been more understanding of what really happened. I understand if you say no, Aizawa said truthfully. Izuku knew he was going to regret it. Thank you, Izuku, Aizawa said. Izuku nodded, then pushed past Aizawa. He headed for the front desk to tell the worried-looking Iki he was okay. He got to the front desk where Iki started asking questions. Izuku wrote on a notepad, "Me and his family have a complicated relationship. I have been avoiding them for a while. They have been looking for me and finally found me. We are having a sit-down during my lunch. Can you stay nearby in case I need an escape?" Of course, Izu. After this, can you tell me everything though? I want to make sure you aren't in danger. Izuku nodded. He walked away to finish putting away books. He hated how quickly time was moving. He was really nervous. It didn't help that a bit into the 20 minutes Hisashi and Hitoshi walked in. By how quickly they showed up, it seemed they were waiting outside or nearby. Izuku failed at trying to hide from Hisashi and Hitoshi. He could feel their eyes on him as he worked. Izuku was sweating. Izuku's timer went off for lunch. Izuku sighed he would have to get this over with. He walked out the break room grabbing his lunch, then headed to where he saw Aizawa looking at books. Hisashi and Hitoshi were also nearby. Aizawa called them over. They all followed Izuku to a more secluded part of the library. Izuku sat down first and took out his lunch. The Yamada Aizawa family sat across from him, Hitoshi between his dads. Izuku couldn't look any of them in the eye. He had practiced this in case it happened, but he never realized how scary it actually would be. He was shrinking into himself. His appetite was gone. He didn't have to look up to know what Hitoshi's face looked like. No one talked, so Izuku started. He knew it sounded mean, but he wasn't really comfortable right now. He was slipping into Cherub mode. We wanted to make sure you were okay first, but we also wanted to talk this out, Hisashi said. Izuku nodded, still not looking up. Where had all his confidence gone? I am going to get this going. We want to hear your background from you. We know your records are false and all lies, Aizawa said. Izuku didn't know, and not knowing was honestly a big part of running. You don't know what they say, Hisashi asked in concern. That makes so much more sense, Hisashi remarked. Izuku asked in genuine confusion. Well, we thought you ran because you thought we were going to hurt you. And we thought you ran because the things it said were true, so you were trying not to get in trouble. Which confused us later when we found out most, if not all, the records were lies. So we have been wanting to hear it from you, Hisashi explained. Izuku was a little more confident now. He took his eyes off his sandwich to look up. Aizawa had a straight face. Hisashi was worried and Hitoshi had a poker face. Start from the beginning and tell us everything. We want to understand what happened and we want to know you are safe, Hisashi said. Izuku nodded. From what Aizawa had been saying on patrol, Aizawa and Hisashi had been doing their research, so it would be better to be completely honest. Fine with us, Aizawa said. Izuku knew it would take too much to sign it out, so he decided to speak. He hated this, but if it meant Aizawa would leave him alone, then so be it. He was going to answer all questions, so he was going to tell them everything. I lived with my mom and dad. They were happy and loved each other. We were happy and my childhood was perfect until 4. When a quirk didn't come in, my father started getting angry. He tried to make one come in. My mother never really did anything. When I turned 5 and didn't have a quirk, I went to a specialist who said I was quirkless. My father turned up the heat on trying to get a quirk to come in. He tried using the stress method. I went to the hospital a few times because of this. My mother never did anything to stop this. At age 6, my father left. A bit after being diagnosed, my school found out. The teachers and parents started the ideas that started to get me bullied. After a while of being bullied, my mom stopped bringing me to the doctor since 1, it was expensive, and 2, the doctor never helped much. The school nurse also stopped helping me. She refused to treat me, saying it was a waste. Since no adult never stopped them, the bullying got worse. The adults actually encouraged it or enabled them. They never stopped them and would make sure to never walk in on them beating me up. They actually started blaming me for everything. I was in school until 6th grade when I stopped going. During that time, the bullying escalated to broken bones and permanent scars. I was constantly told to kill myself and given death threats. A bit ago, I signed up for an online school and have been getting my education. My mother during all of this was honestly nowhere to be found. She gave up helping a year into my diagnosis. She actually started avoiding the house and stopped coming home by the time I was 8. I learned to cook and take care of myself. She kept the apartment stocked with food and would pay for anything I needed. Holidays weren't a thing. I haven't celebrated any holidays since I was 9. She did come home every now and then. Every time she came home, she was really drunk. She never hit me, but she was verbally mean. When I was 10, she told me through a crack in the door that she was disowning me and that she had sent social services to come pick me up. She had packed all of my stuff up. She was nice enough to label it all and to give me all the official documents I would need, like my birth certificate. I was picked up by Mr. Kenzo Watanabe. He brought me to schoolhouse group home. It was named that since it was made from an old school. It was fine there for a while until they found out I was quirkless. That is when the bullying there started. They would sabotage my meals by either giving me less food or causing me to trip so it would be ruined. My things were broken and stolen. My roommate turned on me. He wouldn't let me into the room unless I needed to be there. He would let people into my room to destroy my things. He even let them in while I was sleeping, then leave so he wouldn't get in trouble. I woke up many times to kids beating me up. I was constantly being used as the scapegoat of the facility. None of the caregivers helped me. One day I was called in by the director. She told me that Mr. Watanabe had quit my case. I was to be moved to a group home where I would stay until I turned 18. I was also in trouble since I had gotten suspended from school that day. I was grounded to my room. I wasn't doing great and just wasn't present when 3 kids came into my room. They started beating me up. The past 2.5 months caught up to me and I snapped. It was the first time I had ever fought back or retaliated at all. I beat up 2 kids until they were unconscious. I ran away but was chased down by one of the caregivers. He beat me half to death to teach me a lesson. That was the last day I was at school in the foster home. I became homeless. I had to learn how to protect myself. If you didn't know this, everything in the street is split up into territory. When I found my first alley, I had to fight off gangs, drug dealers, and other homeless people off. This is around when I turned 11. I figured out a system of surviving. I won't lie, most of it wasn't legal. If I was to be charged for my crimes, I would spend about 15 years in prison. When I met you, Hitoshi, I decided I wanted to get my life together so that we could hang out. I got emancipated, a job, an apartment, and anything else I thought I needed. I do want to thank you guys for taking care of me and helping me. During this time, 2 of the foster kids from the group home found me and organized a few people to help beat me up. That's when the stabbing happened. You guys know about my time with you. When I left, I became homeless again because I was scared that you guys were going to arrest or hurt me for what happened. I have been living on rooftops since they usually aren't claimed by anyone, so I have free reign of them. A bit ago, I got a letter from Mr. Watanabe that my mother died in a drunk driving accident. She murdered the other driver. About a month and a half ago, I came here and started my online education. Recently, I was offered a job and now work here. Now that this is settled, I am holding to start saving for an apartment. Izuku finished saying. He didn't look up. He couldn't. He did take a sip of his water bottle. It was silent. Then Izuku felt a hand on his shoulder, which made him jump. He knew the hand was Aizawa trying to comfort him. It wasn't working. Izuku, I am so sorry. This was from Hisashi. Why didn't you tell us any of this while you were with us? You told us some of what was going on with your mom, but you said she had just disowned you, that it had been a year earlier. Izuku was too drained to speak, so he just sighed. Izuku knew it wasn't wise to admit to doing illegal things, but he really didn't care at this point. We would have helped you, Aizawa said. Izuku wasn't going to tiptoe around it. He would tell the truth. The hand left his shoulder. Why did you stab my dads? You could have left without hurting them, but you stabbed Pops and then got my dad hit by a car. Hitoshi blurted out. Izuku jumped. Izuku said. Out of instinct, he braced for impact as he signed this out. I forgive you, Izuku. I made the mistake of cornering you when you were clearly in a panic attack. I should know better as a hero. And I also should have known better having just read your file that you would fight. Hazashi said. Hitoshi stayed quiet. I also forgive you, kid. Like you and Hazashi said. You were scared and fighting for what you thought was your safety and freedom. I shouldn't have pushed you like that. You also couldn't have controlled the car accident. It's not your fault. Aizawa added. We aren't going to arrest you. Thank you for taking responsibility. Hazashi said. Izuku said. Not quite. We want to make sure you are safe. We know you are legally emancipated, so you technically don't have to do this, but would you agree to regular check-in? And maybe living with us until you can get an apartment? Hazashi said. Izuku said. He had seen the shocked look on Hitoshi's face when Hazashi offered to let Izuku stay with them. Okay, either me or Aizawa will come into the library at least twice a week to check on you. What's your work schedule? The shocked looks from the three made him mad. Hazashi smiled and nodded. Izuku got up and threw out his uneaten lunch, heading for the employee room. The second he got in there, he had his head in the trash can throwing up. Aki came in to help him. Izuku stayed in the back room all day trying to fend off the migraine and panic attack. That night he still went on patrol as Green Cherub. It was a patrol with Aizawa. He had a feeling he knew what the break time conversation was going to sound like. He was right. Well, I found out where Izuku worked. Hazashi and Hitoshi went. I decided to go in first and talk to him to get him to talk to the rest of us. Hazashi and Hitoshi went to the next door cafe to wait. We ended up all talking. I am honestly still really worried about Izuku, but talking to him helped to lessen my worry a little. Hazashi is relieved to finally be on a better foot with Izuku. Hitoshi is less mad and even seemed to feel bad for being mad. I don't think he is fully ready to forgive Izuku though. I think it went well. GC. Their patrol after that was normal. Izuku was a little more brutal with the villains in front of Aizawa than usual. Aizawa was too busy thinking to notice. Izuku was still tired. He still wasn't getting sleep, so he was happy when patrol was over.